Hello, everybody at home.
Hello.
Welcome.
How are you doing, Jane?
We're very well, thank you. Right, that's the niceties over. It gets worse from now on. Well, welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Council, with members here with me in the Civic Centre and others at home using the Microsoft Teams. I'll start with some domestic arrangements for the meeting for those in the Civic Centre. Fire alarms. There isn't a fire planned, but if there was, or it happened by accident, please go to Assembly Point D in the car park, wherever that is. Do we all know where Assembly Point D is? Good, that's fine. We'll follow Caleb, he knows. Mobile devices, can you please ensure that all electronic equipment that uses a SIM card is switched off? This includes all mobile phones and tablet devices using the 3G, 4G network. Again, whatever that is. South Ribble Borough Council issued tablets do not contain a SIM card and will therefore not interfere with the audio system, so councillors are free to use them. Members are reminded that if you wish to speak, you need to press the button on the right-hand side of your unit and press it only once. If you press it twice, it will cancel it out, and requests to speak will then be listed in the order they are made. When speaking, please ensure that you angle your microphone appropriately to ensure the best quality of sound. And this is really important for people on the Teams Microsoft, because if your microphone's in the wrong place, they can't hear anything. For members wishing to speak via Microsoft Teams, please use the raise your hand feature. Please can I remind members dialing in from home to ensure that they cannot be overheard by others due to the sensitive nature of this meeting. So please constrain your teenage children from having a row in the kitchen. Right. Voting will be taken by the monitoring officer, who will invite members to indicate if they are opposed to anything. So he will be taking the votes in that way. I know. Right. And the meeting is now being live streamed during the open session for members of the public to watch, and public contributions were requested to be received in writing 2 days prior to the meeting. Can I just say there has been only one question, and that's about the climate issue. And that's coming, but we've not had any other questions. And can I just please remind everybody, maximum of 5 minutes for anybody to be talking, speaking, or disclaiming, or whatever you want to call it, or debating. We're back to debating rules. Okay, everybody? Thank you. Right, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? Councillor Smith, sorry.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I hope you have a good meeting. Can we just observe the protocol for the meeting? Are we supposed to stand up in this arrangement to speak, or do we do it seating? Okay.
Down anyway, so please stay seated as long as your microphone's in the right place. We should be okay. Michael Green, I think. Right. Councillor Green.
Evening, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just for I wouldn't do this in this venue. Could I just seek clarification? You said a 5-minute maximum. Is that per item or for the duration of the meeting, please?
Dual debating rules. Yeah, okay. You can do 5 minutes and then we can all go home at 15:15 if you want. Right. Any apologies for absence, Gary?
Thank you. Yeah, apologies received from Councillor Hancock and Councillor Thirlbourne.
Councillor Smith, did you want to say something? Right. Thank you. Right, thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Gary? Mr. Hall?
None received that Councillor Green has indicated.
Okay. Right. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry, Councillor Green.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. And on item 11, the combined authority, I've already made my position clear on this matter at the County Council. So I think to take part in either the discussion or the voting wouldn't be appropriate, as I will be predetermined. So I won't take part in the debate or the voting for that item. Thank you.
So Yates? What is it? Well, he's on Teams. Councillor Yates?
Same as Councillor Green, Madam Chairman.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to, let me turn the right page over. The minutes of the council meeting on the 26th of February. Can I call upon the Leader of the Council to move that these minutes are approved?
Moved, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Is that seconded? Seconded, Mr Mayor. Thank you. Right, thank you. Any points about accuracy? No? Okay. Can I now sign the minutes? Yes? Where am I signing them?
Madam Mayor,
Bottom?
Madam Mayor, I just need to check that we voted through.
Sorry? Oh, sorry. Are we going to vote these through? Are we? Can you just check?
Consent is to accepting the minutes as a true record of the meeting. They can be accepted.
Right, thank you. Sorry. Right. Councillor Hancock has asked me to say a few words of thanks on his behalf at this moment in the meeting. At this stage of the meeting, I feel it's only right and proper that we express our sincere thanks and gratitude to all those involved in the care and support shown to the residents of South Ribble during this time of COVID-19. Particular thanks should go to the members of the NHS for their tireless work, who have been and still are on the front line. To all those who work in care homes and to those in the teaching profession who have made sure that children of key workers have been looked after to enable the parents to go to work. Not forgetting our own excellent staff here at South Ribble, who have kept our services running, and to all those connected with the community hub, who have made sure that the elderly and vulnerable have been fully supported during these very difficult times. I'm very pleased to say that discussions have taken place with the Citizens Advice Bureau, Progress Housing, schools and others to keep the community hub going forward. Now, please join me in showing your appreciation to all those groups of people for all their dedication and hard work. And this is where we stand up and do give them a clap. Never quite know how long that should go on for, really. Perhaps we should mention one of our company who are on the front line and is still on the front line, but is here tonight with us. Right, item 4, Cabinet report. Can I please ask the Leader of the Council to present his report of the Cabinet to the Council?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I present the report to Council from the Cabinet meeting of Wednesday, the 24th of June. It's a brief report and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Right. Are there any questions? Any questions or comments or? No? Okay. Can we note the report of the Cabinet, please? Yes, thank you. Governance Committee, item 5. Can I please ask the Chair of Governance Committee, Councillor Ian Watkinson, to present his report of the Governance Committee? Where's he?
I'm here. I'm in Teams land.
All right, thank you, Ian.
Yeah, Council's noticed there's 2 reports in the pack covering the Governance Committee meetings that took place on 16th of June and 8th of July, and I'm very happy to keep it brief, and the information is in the reports, and if anybody wants to ask any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Can we note the reports of the Governance Committee? Yeah. No? Okay, everybody? No questions? No comments? Right, thank you. Item 6, Scrutiny Committee. Can I please ask the Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, Councillor David Howarth, to present his report on the work of this committee? Where's David? I don't know where he is.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. We've had 3 meetings of either the Scrutiny Budget Panel or the Scrutiny Committee itself. The report is there before you with our recommendations, and for the sake of brevity, I will move them to note.
Is that seconded?
With regard to the Scrutiny Committee itself, but not the panel, because I'm not a member of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we note the report of the Scrutiny Committee? Any questions, any comments? No? Okay, noted. Thank you very much. Urgent decisions, item 7. Urgent decisions taken due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Can I call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Paul Foster, to present the report?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Quite self-explanatory. With the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council has new powers, in particular to urgent decisions that are required to be made. There's a standing agenda item now on Council, but also on Cabinet, where we will report all urgent decisions. And to remind Council that the requirement for urgency has to be approved via the Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee prior, and I can confirm that that does obviously take place. Happy to present the report and take any questions any members have.
Thank you, Councillor. Is that seconded? Seconded, sorry. Councillor Brotherton?
I just wanted to ask a question. It was just regarding on page 30, 1st of April 2020, the COVID-19 response business grants of £10,000 to £25,000. I just wondered how successful that was. What percentage has been taken up?
Thanks, Councillor Brotherton. I haven't got the exact figures with me, but I do believe we are in the high 90% take up now for those eligible businesses. However, I'll ask Jonathan to write to you with the exact figures, but we are most certainly in the high 90s of take up.
Does that satisfy you, right? Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I've looked at the list of proposals. It says from the 18th of March, there's quite a number of delegated decisions been made. The one I was looking for was the delegated decision on the adoption of the tree policy, which doesn't appear, and I'm wondering why that is the case.
Councillor Foster?
I'll seek clarity from the officers, but Councillor Clark, these aren't delegated decisions, these are urgent decisions which are different. So I'm assuming that was a delegated decision that isn't being reported on here, but I'm looking at the officers to confirm as much.
Yeah. All right. Gary's got some figures.
Just to go back to the last item, it's 93% the percentage of grants paid.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Any more comments, questions? Yes, Councillor Clark.
Coming back on that, I thought it would be an urgent decision because as far as policies are concerned, they're usually presented to the council. So there must have been a reason for that decision to be made at a particular time. And I'm just wondering why it's classified just as a delegated decision and not an urgent decision. I don't think that's in accordance with our normal procedures.
Councillor Foster.
I'll get an answer across to you, Councillor Clark. We'll ask the monitoring officer to respond in the morning, but we'll double check for you.
Are we happy with that, Councillor Clark? Thank you. Can we note this report, everybody? Thank you. Item 8, Shared Services Agreement. Again, can I call upon the Leader of the Council, Paul Foster, the recommendations in the report?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The original shared services agreement dates back to 2007 when shared services was first implemented into the Chorley and South Ribble authorities. As members will have noted, the main body of the new agreement is broken down basically into the financial arrangements, standing orders, liabilities, staffing, the joint committee, data processing, scrutiny and audit. There then are a number of detailed schedules containing the main substance of the agreement between the two parties. And finally, and hopefully never required, Schedule 6 details the exit management plan in the event that one or both of the authorities decides to terminate the shared services agreement. As I say, hopefully that will never be used. There's been 3 sessions for members over the last couple of days as well, briefing in the detail of the new shared services agreement. It is a legal document. It is challenging to understand and follow at times, but the officers have worked tirelessly on this for us for a number of months now. It's been through the joint committee. I do believe it was passed at Chorley Council last night as well, and it's presented tonight to you for final approval. We're happy to take any questions there may be. A final point on the shared services is I'm sure all members will agree that the implementation of the new phase of shared services has been an overwhelming success. We implemented, starting on the 1st of April, right in the midst of the lockdown and the COVID pandemic. And I can't thank the officers, the senior officers, enough for the work that they undertook to ensure that the shared services were fully implemented on time. Highly successful, and I'm now looking forward to presenting the next phase to Council in the coming months. But I'm happy to commend this report and the agreement to Council, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Ogilvie. Oh, see, I didn't know. I've got a fancy thing here that tells me I've only just found it. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of quick points of clarification I'm looking for on page 36 of the pack concerning Schedules 1 and Schedule 2. It says in paragraph 15 that the Joint Committee are now being asked to oversee performance of the existing shared services. I just wondered what authority are they actually being given in terms of overseeing the performance? And linked to that, in paragraph 18 under Schedule 2, it says that it is still the intention that all proposed changes should be approved by the respective councils. As this is a formal agreement, I don't think that's strong enough. I think it should say that all proposed changes will be approved by the respective councils. And I just wonder what your thoughts on that are. Thank you.
Foster?
Is to come on. Sorry, on the latter, Councillor Ogilvie, I think that's the word in the constitution of the shared services agreement is absolutely clear. We are 2 councils, we make our own decisions, and everything has to come back to each individual council for approval. The joint committee isn't a decision-making body. The joint committee makes representations and recommendations to the 2 councils. Now, you know, I'm happy if needs be for that sentence to be slightly amended. I think it's trying to be helpful, but perhaps isn't being. But the changes do have to be approved by the 2 individual councils. As part of number 15, I think it's always been the joint committee does oversee performance, but it still is reported back as the responsibility to the 2 individual councils. I don't know if the officers want to add anything in there.
Yeah, just to deal again in the wrong order of the questions, I apologise, but the word intent was that related to the instruction that the 2 councils had received as legal officers to go away and revisit the agreement. So that was the stated intent of the councils to ensure that they retain sovereignty. So that was why the use of that word was in the report. It's not used in the body of the agreement. So if you go through the agreement, as Councillor Foster says, it's very clear that sovereignty is retained by each council. Addressing the second point about the constitution and what authority the joint committee will have to undertake that function, that's what's before you tonight.
is the proposal to approve that constitutional document of the joint committee. So it will be the decision tonight that extends further the powers to oversee the shared service.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Being involved in the first agreement that was drawn up between the two councils, a bit of an anorak, and I've read through this line by line. And I'm happy to a large extent. Just a couple of concerns. Because of the role that the Shared Services Committee will undertake in the future, its powers and its authority are going to increase. And under Schedule 1 on page 68, I think it's important because of the makeup of the Shared Services Committee that as far as deputies are concerned, I think we should get advance notification. We don't want somebody walking through the door saying, I am the substitute at 2 minutes to 6. And I think that's important. We should get advance notice. And that's in paragraph 2 on page 68. And also, as we're moving forward to making decisions, in paragraph 5, each partner authority shall have 5 votes. Now, if it's a split vote, the chairman has casting vote. Now, if use the scenario that if those members of Chorley Council vote in one way and those members of South Ribble vote in another way, the casting vote goes to the chairman, and I don't think that's in the best interest of democracy. Can we find another way of resolving that particular issue? It may not occur, but it's important to cover it. Thank you.
Are you coming back on that one?
Sorry. Oh, I tend to disagree, Councillor Clark, over the advance notice, because I think, you know, at times when members can't make meetings, like tonight, there's a couple of councillors who've had to withdraw at the last minute through illness, through no fault of their own. And I think we should, unfortunately, allow substitutes as late as required to ensure that both authorities are fully represented at all the joint committee meetings. So, for example, you could have a scenario where there may be 2 or 3 members from one authority that were ill and couldn't attend the meeting, and if we don't allow substitutes right up to the last minute, they could be significantly disadvantaged. So I wouldn't be looking to support that. As for the casting vote, I don't think the schedule that you've mentioned actually says there's a casting vote there, and I'm looking at the monitoring officer to confirm this. It just says it's silent on any casting vote. It just says that each authority has 5 votes each. But I would further state that if we're getting to the point where the 2 authorities are voting against one another, then there are more significant challenges for the shared services. But I don't read that as a casting vote unless the monitoring officer tells me otherwise. And again, I'm happy to leave the clause as it's currently constituted within the agreement.
Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I think the difficulty is that there isn't a better way of doing it. In order for the 2 councils to maintain parity on the committee, there has to be an equal membership, and there has to be a process for breaking that deadlock. I share your views that I very much hope it never comes to the point that it is in the hands of a casting vote, because the next phases of the shared service will be for shared services to really take ownership of further development. So we will be doing things for both councils. It won't be a case of proposals coming from one council or the other. It will be from shared services.
Through it, because it then has to go to the councils for ratification. So there's another backstop, isn't there? Or there's another decision a part of the process. So you will have to find a way through it. They're not actually making a final decision.
Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Clark?
I just want to come back to contradict what Councillor Foster said. If he's read this thoroughly, there is provision in there for a casting vote. So can I suggest that he reads it again? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Okay, thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Bretherton.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering what the cost of the project is, and how is the cost shared between each authority, and how much are we going to gain from it financially, i.e. cost savings, etc., and how's that apportioned between each authority?
Councillor Foster.
Councillor Bretherton, all that information is contained within the budget that the council approved in February. Off the top of my head, I think South Ribble Borough Council was looking to achieve savings in the first year of about £230,000 with the introduction of the additional shared services. And all these costs are looked at annually by both authorities. It goes through the joint committee and it forms part of the budget process. All costs are shared between the two authorities, other than one particular area, which is the visitor economy area, where Chorley takes on additional costs, because at the moment that area of business is more heavily used in Chorley than it is in South Ribble, and I'm sure that will be addressed appropriately in the coming months when South Ribble's visitor economy increases. But it's all the detailed numbers are within the budget that was approved, and there's the first round of budget monitoring performance report is coming out from Councillor Tomlinson in the next week, and the numbers will be there clearly visible to see.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Clark is quite right. There is a casting vote within. I can't just find it now, but I think also in the same paragraph somewhere there is an opportunity for the committee to retire and have an off-the-record discussion, I suppose, if you like, to try and come to some sort of consensus. It does say somewhere, I think, that I just can't find it at the moment, but maybe not a bad idea if it's not in there.
Thank you. And do you want to come back on that one, Councillor? Thank you very much. Anybody else? Nobody on my little machine. And we've no written response. Are we doing the roll call, or do you want to do the roll call? Or?
Yeah. Okay. So the proposal is to accept the shared services agreement as presented before council. Are there any dissenters? Okay, then that proposal is accepted.
Moving on to item agenda 9, annual governance statement 2019 and 2020. Can I call upon the leader of the council, Paul Foster, to move the recommendations in this report?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Requested that the annual governance statement came to full council tonight because I wanted to make it absolutely clear to every single elected councillor exactly what is going on and what has happened over the past couple of years. To cut to the chase, the previous administration 2018-19 statutory accounts and annual governance statement has still not been signed off by the external auditors. And subsequently, following a meeting of the governance committee, I think it was June of last year, there were highlighted a number of discrepancies within the statements, within the annual governance statements, and members need to be extremely concerned about this. Basically, some of the statements that were within the annual governance statement were factually, but I'll be kind in how I phrase this, were factually incorrect, perhaps even deliberately misleading. Internal audits have now been concluded over the last 12 months, and the annual governance statements for 18-19 has been updated, along with the annual governance statements for the first year of the new administration, 19-20. Where we've got to is we've had to admit, and it is the only and right and proper that we did this, to the external partners, agencies and auditors, that we were basically misleading with some of the statements that we'd historically been making. External audits are clearly very unhappy with this, and there's still a possibility that further sanction may come to the council later this year. What I find frustrating, Mr. Mayor, is that the Governance Committee over the last 2 to 3 years raised concerns about corporate governance arrangements and decision making within this authority. The Scrutiny Committee raised issues of concern, and we will all recall on the last administration there was 3 call-ins in one meeting that were all upheld. If that doesn't demonstrate that something's badly wrong, what will? Internal auditors complained that the governance wasn't being followed correctly. The external auditors have raised concerns for about the last 4 years about the corporate governance arrangements within this council. They've issued qualified value for money conclusions and even statutory notices. The opposition party, led by myself at the previous administration, raised significant concerns in many different forums consistently about the governance of this council. And the LGA themselves also raised concerns. But unfortunately, it all fell upon deaf ears. So much so, it was even worse than falling upon deaf ears. The validity of the challenges, they were challenged. This can't be true. This can't be true. Unfortunately, members, it's all true. And I urge every single member of this council, if they haven't done so already, to read the details of the annual governance statement. We said when we took control of this council that we would disclose everything that was going on. Read the annual governance statement and every member should be appalled. What we need to do now is embrace this as a council and take responsibility of it as a council and move forward and deal with the issues. I'm pleased to report to council that we have a detailed management recovery plan in place, and all those actions should be concluded towards the end of this calendar year. I can then report to council that we'll have a clean bill of health. There are 2 further issues that do, however, require resolution in the next month or 6 weeks. That's the leisure and the issue surrounding the audit of the Mackenzie's Arms. Both of these papers will be coming to council or cabinet, and all members will get sight of them. I urge us all to work together to ensure that this council never goes through what it has gone through the last 4 or 5 years. The easiest and simplest way to do something is to do it correctly. Honesty and integrity is critical for us all. I commend the report to council, and I'm happy to take any questions there may be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? I have Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Whilst the general thread and the issues raised within this revised AGS are clearly of serious concern and needed addressing, there are parts that do need some further comment. The key findings contained within this AGS, which I have to say is horrendously long and not very user-friendly, the findings contained within it are backed up by some of the internal audits reports, which point directly to, in many cases, failure of management to adhere to mandated policies that are critical to the robust governance of this council. However, the one that I really take objection to as a former chair of governance is the comments under paragraph 9 on page 90. I don't know whether the then chairman of scrutiny will wish to make any comments of his own under this item as well. My reading of that paragraph is an unwarranted attempt in this report to transfer the blame for the inaccuracies in the 2018-19 annual governance statement onto the hard-working elected members of both Labour and Conservative parties serving on that committee. In referring to a perceived lack of challenge from members on the Governance Committee in relation to the 18-19 AGS, I take this as totally unjustified, derogatory remarks on the endeavours of the hard-working members of that committee. I can only conclude that whoever constructed this paragraph did not attend our Governance Committee meetings in 2018-19. Certainly the external auditors, as frequent attendees, never raised any concern on lack of challenge, rather the opposite. The meetings were frequently lengthy due to the level of challenge, very appropriate cross-party challenge. The current council leader, alongside myself as chair, and the other committee members frequently made their own important contributions in challenging both the reports before us and the officers presenting those reports. I don't recall ever denying any committee member the opportunity to speak and challenge. As committee members, we can only challenge the facts and figures as presented in the reports on the night and the answers given in response to those questions. We are not experts. We are not expected to be experts and cannot be expected to identify omissions or all incidences of incorrect or inaccurate information given to us either in writing or verbally. What I can tell you is that in my time as chair of the Governance Committee, I received a formal letter of complaint from a senior officer of this council, no longer with the council. He was complaining about the level of challenge from the committee being too robust. I didn't agree with him. So I fundamentally disagree with the opinion expressed in paragraph 9, but I do accept that this does not alter the fundamental issues identified in relation to management failings identified. Just one final point on challenge, which the leader may wish to reconsider. The Governance Committee previously always had a vice chair from the opposition party, a position he himself enjoyed for a period of time. Now that that convention has been dismissed, is it not time to offer the vice chairmanship back to an opposition member? This undoubtedly offers the prospect of a more challenging committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've just had a little reminder. Can people have their iPads on silent, please? Thank you. Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer. What a posh title.
Yes. There was a question there from Councillor Ogilvie as to who constructed that paragraph. That would be me. So I'm quite happy to field that and respond to it. You're quite right. I didn't attend the committees, so I am commenting based on paper documentary evidence. I stand by my comments that there should have been more correct challenge. I apologise if you feel that I suggested there was no challenge. Well, the simple fact is that the Governance Committee approved in draft form an annual governance statement that was later proved to be wholly incorrect. And it's as simple as that. That's the basis of my findings. Now, I certainly don't want to suggest that all the blame for that should sit with the members of the committee, because it certainly shouldn't. I accept the point you are making about you are there to test information, but much of it is based on the information that is presented to you. And I completely accept that as a proposition. The point I was trying to make in this report as a whole, and I think it's slightly unfair just to take out individual paragraphs, is that the annual governance statement is a document that is owned not only by officers, but by members as well. And it's the whole council's responsibility to get this right. I may have overstated the responsibility of the individual committees by naming them, but all the committees of this authority had a responsibility. And that was the point I was trying to make. So I certainly apologise if any individual councillors feel that they were unduly criticised here. So that wasn't my intention. But the simple fact that you've identified it, and during your comments you did say this is a serious matter and we do need to own it and take it seriously. That was really the point I was trying to get to. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to enter into a debate about chairmanship and vice chairmanship. This is too important an issue for us to start having silly political debates about decisions that have already been made. The fact is, Councillor Ogilvie, in the Governance Committee meeting that looked at the AGS back in 1819, we raised significant concerns that we did not recognise the statements that were being made. I also and others raised in council that we did not recognise statements that were being made, yet it was still approved. Where I do have great sympathy is that, and I do agree, that you cannot be held accountable if officers are providing you with inaccurate information, and I accept that. I'll give you an example, though, 2 examples, Councillor Ogilvie, where the Governance Committee, for example, could and should have done more. When we received the statutory notification some 2 or 3 years ago from the external auditors, the meeting was consumed by challenging the validity and the right of the external auditors to do what they'd done, rather than debating and getting to the point of actually why we'd got ourselves into that position in the first place. And there were some concerns that the Governance Committee wasn't fully allowing the committee to challenge the exact conditions and problems that this council had. They were more concerned, and there was cabinet members in there influencing this, that the auditors shouldn't be allowed to do that. They shouldn't be allowed to say this is just not true. And I didn't accept that. I'll give you a second example. There was a lot of pressure from the former chief executive to remove budget monitoring reports from the Governance Committee. You know, every member of this council knows I wasn't comfortable with that, but ended up that the budget monitoring reports were taken away from the Governance Committee and then sent to purely the Scrutiny Committee. Then what happened in 1819? Not one budget monitoring report was submitted to the Scrutiny Committee. And what happened? Nothing. Nothing. Nobody would challenge. When we did challenge, we were told to be quiet, that we weren't, we had no right to challenge the officers and speak to them like that. There's 2 examples for you, Alan, where the committees should and must have done more. And that's why I hope all members note now that every single piece of information that this council has, this administration has, gets submitted for councillors' scrutiny. Councillors may not always agree, but I tell you what, we'll always make sure that we make decisions based on accurate, open, honest information. And we're just going to have to take this one on the chin. I agree with the monitoring officer's comments. More should have been done because we bloody knew about it. Thank you.
Councillor Tomlinson.
Thank you. Yeah, I read that comment as well at the beginning of the report, but took great comfort by reading through the entire report, and the section on scrutiny at the end says the Scrutiny Committee continued to successfully hold the Cabinet to account and proactively work to improve the quality of local people. So on my committee, we were obviously doing something that gained approval from someone. I do think there's a great danger. Anybody who's been in public life for a while will have come across external audit reports that are critical, will have clashed swords with Ofsted or the CQC and been found wanting. And I think the worst possible reaction is to shoot the messenger. The worst possible thing you can do when you receive a report like this is to doubt the validity of the person who criticises you. And there is no doubt that that's what happened at this council for 2 or 3 years. There were senior people who were all too ready to call into question the right of external auditors to hold a mirror up to what was or wasn't going on at this council at the time. And I say again, that's the worst possible reaction you can have. I do commend the report. Whilst it is lengthy, I think it highlights exactly what needs to change. But more importantly than that, right at the beginning, it gives a timetable of when things will change. And that is something that we can hold this council to account for. We can all see that chart in the full body of the report that says this is when this will change. And as the leader said, by the end of this calendar year, we should have seen significant changes that will give us all more confidence that this council is behaving appropriately and in a more open and transparent way than it has in the past. I'm pleased for the council, actually, that this report has now come before us all, and we can recognise honestly what went wrong in the past and we can move forward with a clear plan as to how we're going to put things right. And hopefully the next time the external auditors have the occasion to come, they'll see significant improvements in the way this council is run. Thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Phil Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As one of the nerds of the council that reads every single piece of paper, well known for it, and attended virtually every governance meeting ever since it was created from a scrutiny meeting quite a few years ago. I thought the challenge from members, and I spoke at quite a lot of governance meetings, as the members of governance will know, was always allowed to speak, was always allowed to challenge, whether it's challenging the committee on the questions that they were asking, or challenging the external auditors. There's absolutely no doubt about that. A comment that Councillor Foster made, and it's about the budget monitoring report going from governance to scrutiny. Now, if I'm not wrong in this, and I don't think I am, that was a recommendation from the LGA peers that that's what happened. I might very well be wrong, but I don't think so. And they were saying that that the committee is really an audit committee as such, and the budget monitoring should go to scrutiny. And that was a recommendation from the LGA and the LGA peers that actually came into this building.
Yes.
You've totally missed the point there, Councillor Smith. The point was, I don't care who recommended it move. It moved, and then it was never produced. The fact it was never produced is the challenge I have, because a budget monitoring report is a requirement for councillors once a quarter. So my point wasn't that who said what, where, when. My point was the report wasn't produced and presented to members, or even worse, the report was produced and not presented to members. Thank you.
Councillor Phil Smith.
Madam Chair, I did not miss the point at all. It was the decision of where it went, and then if it went from governance, I'm sure they would have been asking for it and demanding it to go there. It went to scrutiny. Maybe they didn't demand it. I don't really know, and he's quite right. The budget monitoring report should go on a quarterly basis. There's absolutely no doubt about that. No argument whatsoever. It always has done. That's where it's always gone. It's always gone to governance. To my mind, that's probably where it should stay, but obviously we've got a different regime. Thank you.
Right, nobody else on here. Right, we're down to the vote now. No more questions or comments? No.
There are two proposals. One is to note the content of the AGS for 2018-2019, and secondly, that the Council receives and supports the improvements contained in the action plan to the annual governance statement. Are there any dissenters? No? Then those proposals are accepted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Item 10, standards annual report. Can I call upon the Leader of the Council, Paul Foster, to move the recommendation? Is it Carol? Is it Councillor Woolridge? Are you with us? Right, turn your thing on.
Sorry, I had turned it on, it went off again.
Oh, right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to move that Council notes the contents of the Standards Annual Report.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions from... Right, Councillor Walton, yes.
Okay. So following on from the Standards Annual Report, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the independent persons who worked at very short notice to produce a report in relation to the decision of the Investigating and Disciplinary Committee. The independent persons are unpaid for their work, and I hope that they will not take too much offence from some of the comments made at the previous council meeting, and that they will continue to be a valuable service to this council in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure how the independent members know what was said at the last full council meeting because it was confidential. But anyway, I have a couple of questions. On on page 158, if I can take you to item number 27, there's a statement there that apologies or explanatory statements were sought and obtained in 2 cases. Unless I've missed it, I'm not exactly sure where those apologies or explanatory statements were made, but we did have a discussion previously in council about how we address some of the issues where the Standards Committee finds that there is a case to answer, certainly against elected members. And at 29, it does state there are 2 earlier cases which have yet to be resolved. But there is an in-principle agreement to how those cases should be resolved. Now, when we had our discussion in council, I'm pretty sure, unless my memory is failing me, that certainly myself and the other 2 group leaders were of the opinion that anybody who is found to have a case to answer, and the recommendation is that they should offer an apology, they should be invited to make that apology in public in front of council. And I wonder if that is still the view of all the group leaders, and if that is the view of the Standards Committee.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At the last meeting that we had when we considered the annual report, there was a discussion which took place about sanctions, give some more teeth to the Standards Committee. And that was supposed to be looked at by the current monitoring officer at the time. I'm just wondering what progress has been made on that, because, and in fact there is a mention here about moving forward by the monitoring officer himself, perhaps would include that as a consideration, because I don't know what Chorley do anyway. Where are we on that? Thank you.
Would you like to replace that?
As I'm sure members are aware, as I'm sure members are aware, sanctions in relation to standards matters are very limited under the legislation. It was a direct response to the previous standards regime, where it was felt that the suspension of members, for example, or other limitations on them inhibited their ability to represent occasionally for minor issues. So we're progressing. We are still looking at it. As part of a constitutional review, we're having a look at most of the matters, including the standards regime. It's not progressed as quickly as we would have liked. There have been other issues that have taken priority recently. But yeah, it is on the radar. We are on with it.
Thank you. Councillor Margaret Smith. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I'm pleased to hear that, because it's something that we feel very strongly about, that there isn't the sanctions that there should be in place. The old regime was a bit harsh, but I think the pendulum swung too far the other way when they actually created this particular set of standards. So I had been of the understanding that some local authorities actually do have a localised sanctions themselves, and it's something that we wondered whether this could be taken forward as against going back to government for some further response to these lack of sanctions. So is it possible that we could look at that as a localised sanctions? And in answer to Councillor Howard's comment about what the leaders thought, and that we should all get together and keep our group in order, and if they have to apologise, they have to apologise in public. Yes, the group does agree with that. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. In direct response to Councillor Howard's question, I too am fully supportive that if the Standards Committee deems so, that any apology should come direct to council, to all councillors in public. There was a peculiarity not so long ago where a member apologised at a cabinet meeting, which I did find a little bit odd. But when I challenged on that, it was deemed that was appropriate at the time. I think if there's an apology coming forward from a member, then clearly that should be at full council. That's my personal view. Clearly, the current regime is particularly weak, as Councillor Mrs Smith said, and it's one of Mr Pickles' worst ever decisions, in my view, because I think standards in public life have dropped drastically, and you only need to look down at Westminster to see how far and bad things can go if it's not controlled properly. The 7 principles of public life we should all sign up to again, and we should abide by them all at all times. Finally, I'm happy to sit down with all the group leaders to look at if there's anything further we can do locally. But the pleasing thing is that the standards within the council have clearly improved across the last 14 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Monitoring officer.
Thank you. It's just in direct response to Councillor Mrs Smith's question. Yes, we will be considering additional sanctions, but it have to be within the legislative framework, and as you mentioned, it's quite weak. Can't say that.
Councillor Filson.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it says in the report that there's, and Councillor Foster just highlighted it, there's less complaints. Maybe we've just all held our hands up and say, what is the point? Because nothing ever happens. There's just no point in complaining. And that's a very good reason for less complaints. Maybe there are some out there, but there's just no point in going through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Anybody else? I'm just looking. Right, there's nothing on. Right, we're on the vote now.
This report is for noting. So there's no need to take a vote on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Woolridge. Combined Authority update. Again, Leader of the Council, Paul Foster, to recommend the recommendations in the report.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's been a lot of noise in the press and locally about the Combined Authority and local government restructuring generally, and I'll try and give a brief update to members now. Firstly, if I may, I'd just like to read out the recommendations to Council so that we're absolutely clear. 2.1, the Council confirms its support for South Ribble Borough Council's involvement in the current discussions to create a Combined Authority for Lancashire, subject to the final proposals being agreed by full council. 2.2, the council supports in principle the inclusion of our directly elected mayor and local government reorganisation as part of a devolution deal, recognising that there are no set solutions for reorganisation and subject to further agreement by full council as proposals are developed. Under 4.2, Mr. Mayor, just so everyone's absolutely clear what a combined authority is. Combined Authority is a legal entity created by Parliament. It enables a group or two or more councils to collaborate and take collective decisions across council boundaries. They can take advantage of powers, resources and funding delegated to them by the government as part of a devolution deal. Partner authorities can also delegate powers to the Combined Authority. All councils within the geography of a Combined Authority must agree to be part of it, and the creation of a Combined Authority cannot be imposed. So, firstly, these are in principle decisions that we're being asked to reaffirm tonight. South Ribble Borough Council, a number of years ago, agreed to the principles, supporting the principles of a Combined Authority, and that of a directly elected mayor. Just to be clear, the government have categorically said there will be no combined authorities without a directly elected mayor. That is the government's. So you either have the directly elected mayor and the combined authority, or you don't have a combined authority. Secondly, the issue of reorganisation in local government has become very, very noisy in the media and within local authorities within Lancashire, particularly over the last 2 months. It is clear to us now that the new government, Conservative government, are insistent that for any combined authority, there must be reorganisation of local government in Lancashire, and they've stated that they would like to see no additional children's services. So therefore, there'll be a maximum of 3, what they would see as unitary authorities in Lancashire. It is also absolutely clear that Lancashire County Council, the Cabinet of Lancashire County Council, have already expressed a desire that there should be an enhanced Blackpool Unitary Authority, an enhanced Blackburn with Darwen Unitary Authority, and Lancashire County Council takes out all the remaining district council and forms a Lancashire Unitary. I wholeheartedly object to that proposal. And as I say, the Lancashire County Council Conservative Administration has already stated publicly that is their desire. Where we are is that there will be a local government white paper coming out in the autumn, and it'll be clearer on exactly what the government's agenda is in respect to reorganisation. My view for council is that I do not see that two-tier working within Lancashire not working. I want to see South Ribble, Chorley, Preston, Wyre, Ribble Valley all remain as local authorities because we are the closest to and we represent our communities the best. That's what we do. We need to be careful though. We do need to be careful. There are discussions ongoing that we are not aware of or not involved in regarding the reorganisation of local authorities in Lancashire. We therefore need to be prepared to act and act quickly. So if the government do make it abjectly clear that there will be reorganisation of local government in Lancashire, whether we like it or not, then we need to have grown-up discussions with partners, other boroughs, to see what will be the best for our residents. It's not what's best for the Conservative Party. It's not what's best for the Liberals or the Labour Party. It's what's best for our local communities, and we must be clear on that. Anything that we sign up to must be for the best of our communities. So the proposals in front of you are generally to accept the principles of a combined authority and allow us to continue negotiations with government, and then also, and I won't be 2 seconds now, Mr. Mayor, I'm almost finished, and also look at what options there may be for reorganisation. There's a white paper coming out in the autumn. When that white paper comes out, I assure council it will be brought to this council for debate, so we're absolutely clear on what the government are asking us for. But it's the old army adage, kill or be killed. We cannot just sit back and do nothing anymore. We have been here before. We have been here before and nothing came of it. However, the views now are strongly that Mr. Cummings and co are going to do what they're going to do. So we need to be prepared for it. And just one final point, Mr. Mayor, this doesn't happen overnight. Even if there was some sort of reorganisation in principle agreed next year, it would take a number of years before any new unitary authority would be formed. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Foster. He has gone a minute over. I have noted it. So if you're going to play fair, somebody wants to do a 6-minute chat on the other side, I've got to be fair about it. Are there any seconders for this? Yes, someone going to second. Thank you. Right. Any questions and comments? I've got Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Our group will tentatively support the recommendations to continue with discussions and include an elected mayor, but we have grave concerns. Next year, frighteningly for me, it's the 40th anniversary since I was first elected as a local councillor, and during that time I've witnessed a gradual erosion of local democracy, which started with the abolition of the metropolitan counties and has since continued. We used to have a Lancashire Local where members of the public could pose questions to the county, and that went. We used to have area committees in this council where members of the public could attend an organised meeting and pose questions, and that went. We saw the abolition of the police authority and the imposition of a police commissioner, and in turn the police commissioner has attempted to take over the fire authority and include that within his remit. Now, I appreciate that our new Prime Minister, Dominic Cummings, has spent 3 years in Russia, learning from the Kremlin, but an elected mayor is yet another unaccountable oligarch remote from local communities. Coupled with this increasing democratic deficit is an increasing crisis facing local government finance. We used to have a three-way split where we had central government funding, council tax and business rates. The central government funding has virtually gone, and we are still left facing the financial crisis in local government. But moves towards slimming down local government by getting rid of local representatives and along with them thousands of local government staff in a cost-cutting measure is not the way to solve it and does not serve the interests of our local communities. So by all means continue to talk, but until we see some meat on the bones of government proposals, we will not blindly commit to go forward. Councillor Foster, in his introduction, alluded to the fact that if these measures go ahead and if there is reorganisation, then we're looking at larger unitaries which become more remote from local residents. So therefore, if these do go ahead, I would now like to propose an amendment. And the amendment is that we add into the recommendations 2.3 that the council recognises that in the event of reorganisation, town and parish councils will have a far more prominent role to play and agrees to bring forward proposals to parish the whole of the borough.
Would you just like to repeat your amendment, Councillor
Yes,
Howarth, and then
yes,
we've got it quite clear?
That we add a recommendation 2.3. The council recognises that in the event of reorganisation, town and parish councils will have a far more prominent role to play and agrees to bring forward proposals to parish the whole of the borough.
Thank you. Now then, yes, Councillor Michael Green, please.
I indicated at the beginning that I would not be speaking or voting on this item, and that remains the case. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to influence members one way or the other. However, there was a factual inaccuracy in what Councillor Foster said. He set out that the LCC Cabinet as a position, and that position is to have a unitary Lancashire. That is categorically not the case. In fact, the Cabinet doesn't have any position at this moment in time, one way or the other. Thank you.
Councillor Margaret Smith.
Are we speaking to the amendment now, Mr. Mayor? Deputy Mayor? General. Okay. Councillor Foster has quite rightly said that in the autumn there will be a white paper coming out. And at the moment, it seems to me that there is a lot of noise and hot air being bandied about as to who should do what, which way we should go. Councillor Howarth alluded to the fact he's been around for about 40 years and seen it all as regards unitary authorities, I was going to say, and the like. And I'm not far behind him, I have to say. And my goodness me, we've been here before. So many different ways we've been going down particular routes of either we're going to be unitaries in our own right, we're going to be combined authorities. We've been talking about it in Lancashire for, I think, about the last 8 years, 4 years. Oh, come on, it's more than that. It must be. We'll compromise and say 6. And there has been an awful lot of debate about elected mayors. At one point it was absolutely a no-no, then it came round to maybe yes it is. So we keep going back and forth and back and forth. My thoughts are that we should wait until we get the white paper in the autumn and then read that, see what the government have actually put on the table, because at the moment I don't think it's very clear what the government has put on the table. I think there's a lot of hot air going on. I have taken a bit of advice about this and I do think the best thing we can do is to wait, read the white paper, bring it back to the council, and if Councillor Foster has anything information that he can actually impart to the Greater Council maybe we should have a Saturday morning debate on it like we did a while ago on various other things. And I think that would be helpful. But at this moment in time, I can't go along with these recommendations, either 2.1, 2.2 or 2.3. So I will have to be voting against it, Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in response quickly to Councillor Green and then Councillor Mrs Smith. Councillor Green, I'm absolutely happy for the record to publicly apologise if County Councillor Driver hasn't discussed this issue with his cabinet. However, he has stated clearly at Lancashire Leaders, without telling you, that that's what he's looking to do, a Lancashire unitary. So I do apologise if County Councillor Driver doesn't discuss this with his cabinet. Councillor Mrs Green, Mrs Smith, the Lancashire Leaders have agreed we are all taking these proposals to our authorities on this round of council meetings to primarily reaffirm our commitment to the combined authority. What's got in the way is the noise about reorganisation, and you're right, that will come out in the autumn. But we feel it's appropriate now to move forward with the recommendations as they are placed. We've all agreed in Lancashire we would do this, and as far as I am aware, all Lancashire councils, district councils and the county council have voted for these recommendations. And finally, in respect to Councillor Howarth's amendment 2.3, I'm happy to accept that amendment because, as he knows, parishing the borough was a commitment that the Labour group, South Ribble Labour group, made in the 2019 elections. Thank you.
Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. There is a lot of noise about it. I've been around about half as long as Councillor Howarth, and probably that means about half as long as Councillor Mrs Smith as well. And we have talked about this before in the past and it's all gone away. I don't think this is going to go away this time. We've got a bullish brand new government with an 80-seat majority who have already shown a willingness to ride a coach and horses through accepted protocols, to the extent that even Councillor Mrs Smith has admitted tonight that we're getting mixed messages from her own government, and that is a theme, is it not? Mixed messages. A plea to our Conservative members. We're not lucky enough to have a Labour Member of Parliament representing South Ribble, but we do have two Conservative MPs, and I'm sure they're going to have some influence on the debate as it goes forward, and I hope that our Conservative members of council will use their influence there. When it comes to a unitary Lancashire, I hope Councillor Green isn't surprised to hear that that is the preferred way forward, because the county council's network, which is dominated, in fact I think it's all Conservative, I don't think there is a Labour county council at the moment, has already expressed the opinion that unitary counties are the way forward, and North Yorkshire has already put forward proposals for a unitary North Yorkshire, Conservative controlled. Hertfordshire has already put forward proposals for a unitary Hertfordshire, Conservative controlled, and Somerset has already put forward plans for a unitary Somerset, Conservative controlled. So I think you would have to be engaged in willful avoidance, I think is this week's phrase, willful avoidance of looking at the facts if you didn't think there was a theme emerging here. I, as a proud member of Lancashire County Council, it does some amazing things. No matter who's in control, it's involved in some amazing work as the County Council with some of our most vulnerable residents. And yet I think a unitary Lancashire would add to the democratic deficit to such an extent I couldn't possibly support it. I think refusing to support these recommendations would be really disappointing, because actually they reconfirm for me our already stated position and provide a backstop of subject to the final proposals being agreed by presumably a future full council. I think we have to allow Councillor Foster, as the leader of this council, to continue the debate over the summer when we're not meeting, and then we would, as the sovereign council, would have the right to agree with the proposals that come forward or don't. So I'll certainly be supporting these proposals. Councillor Howarth's amendment is an interesting one. I'm not sure whether the wording is we're legally able to do that, because to create a new town or parish council, we would have to first get the support of our residents. I think it has to come from the bottom up, but there's certainly the sympathies behind it. I absolutely support, and perhaps the monitoring officer will be able to give us more advice as to whether that can be a legally binding amendment. And if it is, I'll be happy to support it. But I do think we should allow these discussions to go ahead, and to vote against these proposals. To vote against these proposals would really set the cat amongst the pigeons across Lancashire. And I feel that if we need to come together on this, we need to come together and come up with something that is workable, that we can put forward to government, because if we don't, we'll be told what we're getting, and we'll be told if it was raining and you all went outside, you couldn't make your minds up whether you were getting wet or not, by people, not just council driver, but by government themselves, I think. So I would urge all members to support these recommendations, and if we can, the amendment too.
Councillor Moon.
Thank you.
Whoever you are.
I'm remote, I'm out in the ether. It was just to say, I don't want to open up a big discussion, Mr Deputy Mayor, about declarations, but I'm just concerned the discussion has slightly strayed into reorganisation, unitary, lots of conversations going on in the chamber about unitary, and I just want to say that I'm engaging in this and I'm engaging in the vote, because for me this paper, the recommendations are combined authority, and there is nothing in these papers that deals directly with any recommendation with regards to reorganisation of local government. And I just want to say it on the record, because obviously I'm an employee of Lancashire County Council, so I'm just mindful that the debate has strayed slightly, and I just want to be clear that I am engaging and I am voting, because it's specific to combined authority as far as I can see. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moon. Councillor Phil Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You won't be surprised that I'm going to vote against this for very good reasons. There is a white paper coming out. There is a lot of conversation going on. There is some noise going on, and there's a lot of people having their arms put up the back to say you've got to make a decision, otherwise the decision will be made for you. It wouldn't surprise me if the white paper came out with something a little bit different. It may be a bit softer, I don't know, but I know there's some serious discussions going on, and really it would be in our own interest to actually wait for that white paper to come out, and we can have a proper debate at council about that. So I will be voting against whichever recommendation goes forward. Thank you.
Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
I've had my say.
Don't argue with technology. Big impression. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. It's a pity these papers were out 7 days ago, that in fact that particular amendment didn't come before us in writing in advance of the meeting. If I understand it correctly, my point was, it's been raised by Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, that we don't know what the views of the residents are. We haven't had time to consult. So from that particular point of view, I would be voting against it. Thank you.
I've got the interim chief executive next on my list.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just if I could help members, there's been a lot of chatter about all the noise in the system. What's kind of missing from the debate is a reflection on a meeting that the leaders held with the civil servants. The civil servants from the MCHLG came to address Lancashire leaders, and they made it absolutely clear in their message that reorganisation is continuing to be at the top of the agenda. but more importantly, the progress on the combined authority should be addressed as quickly as possible, because whatever funding there is available, you need to get in the queue. And if you're not in the queue, you'll go to the bottom of the pile. So there is a risk that if we can't agree on a combined authority approach, that we'll miss the opportunity, and none of us want to be in that place.
Thank you. Can I now invite people to discuss the amendment? I know we've had little bits about it, but I'm aware that other people may have something to say about that. Does anybody want to have any comments or questions about the amendment? No? No? Okay. Fine. Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. There was a suggestion around the amendment and the wording of the amendment. I've got some proposed wording for your consideration, Councillor Howarth, as it's your amendment. So the Council recognises that in the event of reorganisation, parish and town councils will have a more prominent role to play, and agrees to investigate options to parish the unparished areas of the borough. So it leaves a bit more flexibility. It's not a decision to do it, but it investigates the options around being taking steps to do it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think you can just impose a parish council on an area. Clearly, there is a process to go through, which is why I was asking for proposals to be brought forward to commence the process of consulting the residents. But I'm happy with that wording.
Councillor Moon? Councillor Moon? Out in the ether? She's gone back to the room.
No, my hand's not up.
Your hand's not up? Oh, well, I've had a message it is, so I'll put your hand up.
Sorry.
Okay. Right, Monitoring Officer, I think that's everybody's. Has it got a second? Yes, Councillor Turner. Councillor Turner.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So there are three recommendations before the council now. That the council confirms its support for South Ribble Borough Council's involvement in the current discussions to create a combined authority for Lancashire, subject to the final proposals being agreed by full council. That the council supports in principle the inclusion of a directly elected mayor and local government reorganisation as part of a devolution deal, recognising that there are no set solutions for reorganisation and subject to further agreement by full council as proposals are developed. And finally, council recognises that in the event of reorganisation, parish and town councils will have a more prominent role to play, and agree to investigate options to parish the unparished areas of the borough. I would suggest, Madam Mayor, that we do it by... Yeah, thank you. I'll read off the list and ask, invite councillors to indicate whether they're for, against or abstaining, because there's already been indications that people are not going to vote in favour of this. So, Councillor Adams. Councillor Alty.
For.
Councillor Bell.
For.
Councillor Blow.
For.
Councillor Bretherton. Councillor Belinsky-Gelder. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Clark. Councillor Colton.
Against.
Councillor Donoghue. Councillor Evans. Councillor Flannery. Councillor Forrest.
For.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Mary Green. Councillor Michael Green. Not voting, apologies. Councillor Hesketh.
Against.
Councillor Higgins. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Hughes. Not here. No. Councillor Susan Jones. Councillor Lomax. Councillor Marsh. Councillor Martin. Councillor Melia. Councillor Moon.
Against.
Councillor Mort.
Against. Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mullineux. Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Rainsbury. Councillor Sharples. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Margaret Smith. Councillor Phil Smith. Councillor Suthers.
Against.
Councillor Titherington. Councillor Caleb Tomlinson, apologies. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson. Councillor Trafford. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walton. Councillor Watkinson.
For.
Councillor Watson. Councillor Wharton Hardman.
Against.
Councillor Wooldridge.
For.
Thank you. The amended motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 12, Hurst Grange Park Coach House Lottery Project. You've got a supplementary agenda pack for this. I call upon the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Health, Leisure and Wellbeing, Councillor Mick Titherington, to move the recommendations in this report. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, members have got before them a comprehensive report. The report has been before the Scrutiny, Budget and Performance panel. And at that scrutiny meeting, concern was expressed about the clarity and transparency relating to the escalating costs of the council's contribution to the project. In that regard, I think we accepted that we have to learn lessons and ensure that members are kept fully informed as these things develop. Scrutiny did ask for a further consultation session to take place, and indeed that took place last Tuesday. Because of the concerns expressed by the scrutiny, the leader of the council has asked for this to come before council for a decision. You will see from the report that the project goes back a long way. It goes back to 2005, in fact, and it has, throughout that time, has had the support of members and of the community. The Friends of Hurst Grange Park have played an important role and an important part. I believe that it is an exciting project that will see the restoration of a historic building, transferring that into a historic building and into a visitor attraction, an educational facility and a major community asset. I think it will be a tremendous boost for the park, for the people of Penwitham and indeed beyond. It's in line with our vision to breathe life into our parks and open spaces. And I would say to Council that the Heritage Fund do not make awards lightly. And I think it is a tribute to our officers and members of the community that they have been able to successfully present a successful bid to the Lottery Fund and have been successful in gaining the support or gaining an award, only one of two awards that were made in the Northwest by the fund. And I would just remind members that we are getting a nearly £800,000 project for a £253,000 or less contribution from the council. And in today's day and age, in anybody's language, that is a good deal. So for those reasons, I'm asking and hoping that council will support the recommendations in the report that is before them, so that we can get on and get on with the project and deliver it. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Councillor. Is that seconded? Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Right, have we got any questions? We've got Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. As a member of Broad Oak, the coach house sits within my ward, and I'm totally supportive of this restoration and landscaping of the surrounding area in the park. The report recommends that full council provide approval to commence the tender process for this project, and I am indeed in favour of this. However, I do have a few points I wish to make following my review of this report. It would have been helpful to have had a summary table in the report breaking down the figure of 789,325 into its 4 constituent parts and providing against each value the source of funding, the funding value itself and the costs incurred to date. I also note that there is no reference to the costs incurred for the 3 years of work performed by council officers in supporting the bid. Therefore, to refer to the value of 789,325 as an overall project cost, I feel is slightly misleading. I note in the report at paragraph 10 that the cost estimate referenced at 789,325 is dated October 2019, and I have concerns that this estimate is now 10 months old and would suggest is now out of date validity already. I'm also concerned that at paragraph 17 of the report, a caveat reads, any increase in costs can be met by contingencies with the project costings and, if needed, underspends in other projects identified in the capital programme. This caveat leaves me with the impression that there is already no adequate financial certainty of the outturn of the costs of this project. Finally, both myself and Councillor Howarth accepted the invitation to attend a presentation at the Coach House on the 14th of July, and we were grateful of the time the officers spent in presenting us with the plans for the restoration and the landscaping. At this presentation, the officers and the Cabinet member present provided us with a guarantee that the price of this project would not exceed the 790,000. So therefore, Madam Deputy Mayor, may I request a price cap is placed on the project so that following the tender process, should the costs exceed the 790,000, then we can either pull out of this project or look at de-scoping this project to ensure that we do not exceed the financial cap. Thank you.
Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I mean, for the benefit, our group will be supporting this. I think it's very regrettable that given all the hard work that the Friends of the Coach House and the Friends of Hurst Grange Park have carried out down the years, that they were led to believe that this had all been signed off and it was going ahead. We will be supporting it with some reservations. I still have a bruise on my chin from when this first came to the Budget Scrutiny Committee, and I saw eye-watering figures that are being mentioned here. And having gone back through the trail, if you like, I put a question to the then Cabinet Member Finance and Resources back in January 2016, questioning where we were at with the Hurst Grange Park Coach House restoration and trying to move it along. But what I was told at the time was the council did not simply have a blank cheque. And then when I further put a question to the Member for Corporate Support and Assets, Councillor Clark sent me a written response, for which I was grateful, in which we were talking about figures of 470,000 in total, and a commitment which was then signed off by the Cabinet in 2018 of 23,000 from the council. So I was somewhat staggered to see that these figures had risen to this sum of 790,000 with a commitment from the council of 253,000, because when Councillor Moon appeared on Lancashire TV, which we are referred to in the report, I can quote her as saying that it's an expensive project, there is no way to get away from that, and it's going to cost money. And when she was asked where the money was coming from, she then stated, we as a council are putting 30,000 into that, so 47,000 and £500,000 ask. And that's the 28th of February 2019. By February 2020, we're not putting 30,000 and a 47,000 figure in, we're putting 253,000 in. And I cannot find anywhere still, despite a very intensive scrutiny meeting, as to where at every stage, through Cabinet reports or delegated decisions, this money was agreed. But we are where we are. Having been to the presentation, having posed questions, having watched all the videos of the restoration project, there's no question this will be an excellent building, but I still have questions over the cost of it. And let's not forget, this isn't just a one-off capital programme here. There are revenue implications for years to come. So having said that, I will support it.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Mayor. It's on page 344, under comments of the statutory finance officer. It says that in the capital programme there's £783,000. Should that be a lesser amount in the capital programme? Because as I understand, some's coming from the National Lottery, over 500 and something. So is that figure correct? There's £783,000 in the capital programme, or is it a mistake? Okay.
Foster.
Yeah, I can answer that for Councillor Bretherton. It's the full cost must go within the capital programme, be approved by council. Council then recovers the lottery fund money back into our coffers, so to speak. So the full amount must go in the capital programme. So that is correct. For Councillor Howarth, I do get your frustrations, David, with the process, and you know we've discussed this at length, and the uplift never was formally approved at any meeting of the Cabinet, as you're aware. Hence why we were clear that we must bring this back to council, therefore for full approval. But my view is, why should the local residents and the wider community suffer because the corporate governance arrangements within the council haven't necessarily been followed correctly, and that won't happen again. I do commend, by the way, the detail within this report now, Councillor Titherington, and obviously it's a clear benchmark now moving forward of the type of detail that Cabinet and Council should see when making its decisions. And finally, for me, Councillor Turner's point regarding the costs. Angela, in there, in the recommendations, the result of the tender must come back to Cabinet for formal approval. So if it is subject to another round of approvals to put your mind at rest. And so clearly, if costs have escalated, then they would have to be dealt with at that point. But what I would suggest, I would be looking for, if costs were escalating, then the scope of the project would have to be reduced so that it fits in with the approved budget. Thank you.
Councillor Margaret Smith. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, like Councillor Turner, went down to see the project at the Coach House, gave me the opportunity last Tuesday, and saw the visuals of how it is going to look. And certainly it is a very grand project, there's no doubt about that. It is certainly something that I'm sure will enhance the park greatly. I am concerned, like Councillor Howarth, about the costs. It is a huge amount of money that we're going to invest there. There was a couple of things that just occurred to me one while I was there, was that it was pointed out to me that the hayloft, the original hayloft, will now be put into a useful room for meetings. The staircase is very tight, and I wondered if it will need a lift for people with a disability to actually get up to that particular room, or whether, because it's a conversion, it doesn't need to comply with the Disabled Facilities Act, the Disabled Act. And the other thing is there a time scale on when the lottery money will not be available to us, or is it just an open-ended amount of money that's been offered? Because obviously we've still got to go out to tender and got to make sure the tender's right. And as Councillor Foster said, if it comes in over budget, we're going to have to scale it back. So I just wondered if there was a deadline there that we're going to have to work to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Clark?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to confirm what Councillor Howarth said was the situation at the time in terms of the amount of money that was allocated to it. I'm going to vote for this. I was involved in it for a brief period, and I'm going to support it because I think it not only has local benefit, it has much wider benefit, just like Worden Park. And I think it's going to be an asset, a good asset to this council. The question I'm asking really is, I can see the contributions which have been made towards the project, and there's still a bid for 30,000 outstanding from the Environmental Fund. I'm just wondering whether in fact we're going to get a decision on that, which is going to be positive. But there must be other partner organisations available, such as Penwortham Town Council, and I wonder if they've been approached and what their response is. That's one particular one, but there are other partner organisations which can and should have been approached. Thank you.
I've nobody on my screen. Has anybody else got anything to say? Councillor Moon?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Just to come back as a point of clarity, really, because the figures are being bandied about of what was said, and clearly I was the Cabinet member at the time who did the interview and brought this through Cabinet. The monies was always for the exploratory phase. It was not about the build out, and that was clear at the time. This was about the council getting behind the community who worked tirelessly to fundraise to try and get this project started, and a lot of money was required just to get the exploration, get the plans drawn, put the bid together to go forward to bid for future monies. So I think it was clear at the time that was what that money was about, and that was about the council, and people were supportive at the time, as we're supportive now from the sound of the discussion about getting behind this and getting the documents together for the bigger bit. Clearly the council changed hands in May 19, so I took the vote in February 19, changed hands in May 19, and the next update according to the schedule in front of me here is June 19. So where it's gone from there, Mr Deputy Mayor, we're all surmising and commenting. But I just want to be clear that this is not a 30,000 that's now gone up to $250,000. They were very separate things for very separate purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
Thank you. I think it's a shame really that we've got to this stage, and obviously through a poor communication of the project over recent months, because it is an exciting project, and clearly the council is going to support it. But I'm glad to hear Councillor Clark compare it to Worden Hall, because that's very much how I see it too. It's going to be bringing back a dilapidated building that, to be honest, when I visited a few years ago now, maybe as long as 3 or 4 years ago with the Friends, I admired them profusely, because I couldn't really see how they were going to realise their ambitions, and yet they were sticking at it. So I'm really pleased that we're going to be able to see those ambitions come to fruition. I'm glad to hear the leader say that he thinks that what should be the scope of this now is the finance. So any further additions to the finance, then we need to look at the scope of the project and scale it back, because I think that's the right thing to do, and it's the approach we've been taking with Worden Hall as well. There's a real opportunity around procurement now. We, as an administration, have said we want to procure works from people who bring real social benefit to the people of South Ribble, and what an exciting project to be able to do that one. And finally, I think this was clearly a good piece of scrutiny work, holding the council to account, so well done on that. But also, I think to commend the leader to clearing it all up and bringing it back to full council. And clearly we are going to support this, and let's get on with it.
Councillor Phil Smith.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the report said, this has been on the go for a long, long time, and I've lost count, I suppose, the amount of meetings that I've had with the Friends group and people in Penwitham at my neighbourhood meetings, time and time again. I mean, I'm very, very familiar with the place itself, and very familiar with the work that was going on. What I'm not familiar with is the project creep over maybe the last 12 months or whenever it was. I'm not quite sure of that timescale, but project creep has obviously been substantial. Whether that project creep was dictated by the lottery bid, I don't really know. I don't whether the report actually answers that, but it could very well be the case. I certainly like the idea of the finances fitting the project, and I will be supporting it. And if we can support it on that basis, I think that would be a good idea. And the Friends really do. I've been friends there for a long time and doing such a lot of good work, not just on that, but around the park itself. Which saves the council money in the long run, to be quite honest. So from a capital point of view. Okay, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Nobody else? Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Thornton? Yeah, there isn't anybody else.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, thank you very much to all the councillors who've made a contribution. I mean, I think I'm sort of almost exhausted at being able to reassure everybody, first of all, about the cost of the project and the lessons that have been learned in relation to the transparency with regard to the cost creep, as you say. I just want to clarify a couple of things. I think that those who attended the consultation last Tuesday will have been as reassured as they possibly could, is that the cost will not increase, and if it does, it would have to come back to council for a decision. I think the thing that I would have to say is that decision would not be a scaling back, because as Councillor Phil Smith has said, much of this has been dictated by the Heritage Lottery Fund, and it was important that when we presented that bid, is that was the bid, that's what we were going to do, and that was a condition of getting the money. So I just don't want to mislead members in that regard. I mean, if there is an escalation of cost, I think it will be, well, we're pulling out of the deal completely, but there wouldn't be an option to scale back. I don't believe, I might be wrong, but I just think that members should be clear on that. In terms of the questions that were asked about what funds, I mean, if you look at what funds were allocated, from the different groups, I mean, I think in paragraph 11 on 335, it does lay out there what the National Lottery Heritage Grant is, what our contribution is, what Friends of Pearse Grange have contributed, and the volunteer time contributions. And in relation to Council Bretherton's inquiry, when it went to budget in February, there was, in the capital programme, there was an allocation of 783,000, which with the qualification that it was subject to a heritage lottery bid. I do say that, I mean, and I have admitted, is that perhaps it wasn't clarified within that figure what we would be expected to pay as a council. So, I mean, having said all that, and in terms of the staircase, or I think the upstairs will be allocated for a studio and will not be, studio use will not be open to the public in that sense. That's my understanding of it. So, and in relation to Councillor Moon's contribution, yeah, it is true. I mean, the bid was in two stages. In phase one, that's what the 30,000 was allocated for, in order for us to sort of be able to prepare a bid to go on to the second stage. Having said all that, and thanks for the contributions, and I hope that we will support it, because I do believe it is an exciting project, and we have given the assurance that the costs, and hopefully the costs to the council, will be less than the 253,000, and that's what we hope for. But I mean, I'll be grateful for council if they support the recommendations. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Just to come back on it, because he hasn't answered my point about lessening the cost on the council with a view to finding out whether there are other partner organisations who are going to benefit from this when it's completed. He hasn't answered that question. Thank you.
I would have thought, I would hope, and I mean, and I would instruct the officers to explore every opportunity where they can get funding that would reduce the costs to the council. I can't guarantee that, but I mean, I would hope that where we would be using our best endeavours to reduce the costs, and if we can get other partners who would contribute, contribute something to that, all well and good. But I would hope that those partners will get involved in terms of the revenue that we would hope to get from the coach house once it's being restored. And I think there are already groups that are interested in relocating into there so I think in terms of recovering costs, it would be on the revenue side.
I think we get to the vote now. I don't think there's anybody else. No?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. There are 5 recommendations at paragraphs 2 to 6 of the report. Are there any dissenters to those recommendations? No. The recommendations are passed.
Thank you. Can I just add, we're now 2 hours into this meeting. I'm aware of that. It's going to be a long meeting. So take a deep breath. Have you brought your butties and your flasks? Because I think you need it. Take a deep breath. Have a moment just to shake your heads. What? Yeah. Okay, my loves. Right. Item 13, the adoption of the climate emergency strategy. And I'd like to bring in Councillor Sue Jones, who is the Cabinet Member for the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I've been rehearsing that, I still got it wrong. Just over a year ago, South Ribble Borough Council declared a climate emergency, and a cross-party climate emergency group was set up. No one could have predicted the devastating events since then affecting everyone internationally, nationally and locally. What hasn't changed is the urgency of dealing with climate change, and despite horrendous difficulties, the work has gone on. Councillor Keith Martin, the Chairman, will introduce the adoption of the Climate Emergency Strategy paper. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank him and Vice Chairman Steve Thirlborn for stepping into their roles at a difficult time. Thanks also to Neil Martin and Melanie Berry for all their hard work in preparing this paper. and Jennifer Mullin for her support, advice and encouragement. I'm a great believer in cross-party cooperation, and I'm confident this group will continue to work together to achieve our aim of carbon neutrality by 2030. Councillor Martin will now introduce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Firstly, just a personal comment that we're all familiar with the phrase, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and this is personally how I feel by taking over from my late friend, Councillor Ken Jones. Members will recall that in July 2019, we voted and passed on a proposal by Councillor Ken Jones to declare of a climate emergency and the formation of the Climate Emergency Working Group. Since this time, the group have met on a number of occasions and agreed a scoping document reported to full council in January 2020. Since then, the group has been working on a draft climate emergency strategy. I am now in a position to present item 13 on the agenda, the draft climate strategy, emergency strategy for adoption by the council. Members will note that the strategy outlines our current position in relation to identified baseline years, the impacts of climate change upon the borough and the areas in which we need to concentrate our efforts in order to achieve the biggest impact with regard to reducing CO2 emissions. Once adopted, the group will develop, in conjunction with partners, the public, schools, and members of a detailed action plan identifying the measures to be progressed to achieve our goal of making South Ribble a carbon neutral borough by 2030, if not sooner if possible. However, due to the enormity of the task, work has already begun on some of the in-house measures, including provision of electric solar panels to the Civic Centre and a review of replacement of the lighting of the Civic Centre. I ask members to consider the document in front of them and agree that this should go forward as the Council's adopted climate emergency strategy. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Martin, is that seconded? I hope it is. Thank you, Councillor Foster. Are there any questions from members? Oh, I've only got Councillor Ogilvie on my machine. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm very happy to support this strategy. During the notice of motion discussion, we made very clear our support for this initiative, but highlighted our reservations about the deliverability of net zero CO2 emissions across the borough by 2030. And on that, our reservations remain. But that is no reason not to support the effort to reduce emissions as far as is practically achievable by 2030. The report highlights that the bar has been lowered through the omission of the Scope 3 emissions from what will be the 2030 figures. It also now concurs with the reservations we expressed during that debate around the two major contributors of CO2 emissions, i.e. that of housing and transport, both of those being outside the direct control of this council in its ability to deliver the necessary reduction to reach net zero by 2030. The Council's own contribution to reduction through the way it manages its buildings and carries out its operations is laudable, but in terms of the overall target for the borough, it is of minimal significance in terms of the overall numbers. The data shown in chart 4 on page 190 highlights the existence of the carbon wedge, i.e. that is the size of the overall borough reduction in CO2 necessary by 2030. That is some 700,000 tonnes of CO2 on an ongoing basis. The council and its operations amount to just over 4,000 tonnes, or just 0.6% of that borough target. So it just demonstrates the magnitude of the challenge that we all face. And of course, remembering that we do have little direct ability to bring about major reductions in the two main areas, particularly the retrofitting of heating systems within existing housing and the elimination or the eventual elimination of petrol and diesel driven vehicles. However, in closing, and just trying to get my head around this and trying to quantify the effect of the initiatives that we've already put in place around tree planting and electric car chargers, could we have confirmation of the following, please? I don't expect answers tonight, and I'm happy to pass over these questions after the meeting if somebody's trying to scribble them down somewhere. Number one is, at what age do the trees that we are currently planting reach maturity in terms of their ability to maximise carbon capture? And then based on that, the answer to that question, by 2030, what contribution do 110,000 trees then make in terms of tonnes of CO2 captured? And the third question is, what is the current percentage utilisation of the borough's electric car charging facilities? The answers to that will give us some idea of where we're at and where we need to get to and what our contribution to it is able to achieve in terms of the overall target. So, thank you.
Sir Titherington.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think this is an excellent report, and just in response to Councillor Ogilvy's contribution, I've said it before. I said in relation to climate change, is that we are drinking in the last chance saloon, and I put it this way: if you're part of the problem, then good. Yeah, more rehearsals. Yeah. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I mean, yeah. I must remember to sort of get a bigger build-up. But what I want to really refer to is pages 227 to 229, because I believe where it sets out the actions that we can do, they are real actions that we can achieve. It's possible for us to do it, and in so doing, we would be making a contribution. And I think whatever we can do, we've got to try. Now, it may be there might be some sort of really technical problems about what the effects are of any initiatives, one way or the other. But it's a culmination of things, and everything has got to be tried to make that contribution to ensure that what we do is that we're preserving the planet, not just for ourselves, but for future generations. And I think that was one of the legacies of Councillor Ken Jones that was appreciated, that he was a champion of ensuring that we did tackle, we played our part as a council in the wider campaign about making the planet greener and saving it for future generations. So I think I commend the report. I'm happy to support it, and I'm happy to sort of refer to those actions that we can get involved in. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just to pick up the points that Councillor Titherington made, what we can do. I've raised it before about the increasing propensity for wood-burning stoves, and I know for a fact that, in fact, people are not burning or are burning inappropriate materials on their wood-burning stoves, and certainly on what should have been approved fossil fuels on coal fires. They're not been adopted. Now, we have a smoke-free borough here, and we have the ability to enforce that. I would have thought that we would have built that into this strategy to emphasise the point that we can do something about the increase in CO2 emissions, because they're going to increase because of all these wood-burning stoves. There's no doubt about it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Trafford.
Thank you. I'm just checking I'm audible. I am, yeah. What I'd say in relation to this really is that however ambitious you think we need to be on this, times that by 100 and you're still nowhere near how ambitious we need to be. And I think that I had the pleasure of being able to second the original motion, and I made that clear that this wasn't a promise, it was a target. And that's the reason that we've done it in this way, so we can be ambitious and we can exceed any level of expectation as possible. Really proud of the work that's in there. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think that this is an example of where cross-party working can go well. And I just think that that's probably the perfect phrase for our friend who we've sadly lost. So thank you for endorsing me, and I hope that we all vote in favour of this. Thank you.
Oh, we shouldn't do that. You made me cry. I was having a little cry now. I've nobody else on my machinery. Anybody else who's not got a right? Okay. Sorry. Oh, you just popped up then, just like that. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you. I only mentioned that because you seem to be winding up, and I wondered what was going to happen with the supplementary agenda. The questions from the member of the public.
Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Just with regard to fossil fuels and burning wood in wood stoves, I mean, the policy that South Ribble has does say that the wood burning stoves are exempt at the moment from certain types of fuel, but we also have a responsibility as individuals to highlight that burning inappropriate fuel is inappropriate, hence the title. Only yesterday someone was trying to give away shed wood that was made from a shed for a burning stove. They fell into two categories really. One, supplying a fuel that's not suitable for general burning, which is against our policy. So I think it's also up to us as individuals to grab this as well. We are responsible for what we put in the environment. The rubbish, I've said this before, the rubbish you throw away or recycle is rubbish that you bought in the first place. The easiest way to stop that is by not buying the rubbish and giving it back to someone who can deal with it and making that point. There is a lot of work to do, and we have to try. We have to be positive in our trying as well. I don't think we should be trying to pick holes in how we can't do it. We should always try and strive to learn how we can do it. The list here, with regard to other comments, is not an exhaustive list. Things will come up. For instance, I know if you look at, I sit with a forum of doctors. We do a radio show. Councillor Watkinson was one of the recent guests on that radio show. And it's a general agreement that, I don't know if you remember, that children from Chernobyl were taken away from the area and brought to this country for a month. That month gave them extra life, extra longevity. And currently, although what we've experienced with the recent pandemic is saddening for the loss, the air quality has improved, and this will improve our lives as a population as well. We will live longer, or the ones that are left, sadly, will live longer than we would have done before the shutdown. What we need to do now is make sure that we try and stick to what we've seen and the examples that we've seen of people working at home, less transport and things like that. We can reroute, we can make planning more effective in both housing and transport, because we can put traffic management plans in place. For instance, directing HGVs to junction 29 instead of 28. They're all possibilities. Nothing should be unexplored, because if we don't explore it, we could miss quite a big opportunity.
And now there is a question from the member of the public. Have you got it, Councillor Jones? So Councillor Jones will read the question and answer the question.
Members have the questions in front of them from a member of the public. So if you take a look at those, the first question is about only being 2 monitoring quality stations in the borough. If I can say that the climate emergency strategy is dealing with the reduction of greenhouse gases across the borough to achieve the council's target of net zero emissions by 2030 and to mitigate against the harmful outcomes of climate change. As Councillor Titherington has alluded to, there is a separate air quality action plan which we have been working with for over a year, dealing with air quality issues. And while some actions may cross over, the two areas are distinctly different. The council currently has 43 monitoring points covering 32 locations. These are located in targeted areas of poor or likely to be poor air quality and cover Leyland, Bamber Bridge, Lostock Hall, Penwortham and Walton le Dale. The question number 2 is to do with street lighting. And the comment about this is that the climate emergency strategy doesn't contain any actions to tackle greenhouse gas emissions. These are to be developed during a full public consultation exercise later in the year. However, the level of street light is one area that can be investigated further, although some roads do require a minimum amount of lighting to be provided. And just to confirm, the provision of street lighting is a county council function and not one for South Ribble. The question on trees, I think everybody knows by now that the council has already committed to planting 110,000 trees, and this is being managed under a different project. But as the Cabinet Member for the Environment, I can assure you that the tree planting programme, which is well underway, is very professionally managed by our officers. The climate emergency strategy, while supporting the project, does not directly deal with the tree planting commitment or management of it. And finally, the issue to do with planning. Planning policy at both local and national levels already includes policies in relation to greenfield sites, biodiversity and the provision of open space. In addition, a new revised Central Lancashire core strategy is currently being developed. In answer to Councillor Ogilvie, I know people do have reservations about our aspiration for 2030. We are all going to work very hard to achieve that. I think, again, as Councillor Tithington said, if we don't do it, then we can't achieve it. And our aim is to achieve as much as possible. I will get the answers from our officers about the age when the trees mature, and the other 2 questions that you asked of me. I think that covers it.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, just a question cropping up from that. Will the resident who's put this question to the council, will they receive a written response?
I'm very happy to do that. I wondered whether that resident was actually watching it on the live streaming, but certainly if she's not, then a written response will be given.
I asked that question because this particular resident is in my ward.
Okay, and do you know if she's live streaming?
She will expect a written response.
Then that's what she will get.
Thank you.
There's nobody else. I'm just having a quick. No. Right, I think we're at the vote stage now.
Okay, the recommendation is that members adopt the climate emergency strategy. Are there any dissenters? No, that recommendation is passed.
Thank you.
Item 14A, the Constitution, public participation. I call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Paul Foster, to move the recommendations in the report.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks to the Governance Committee for the work that they've done in bringing these recommendations forward to Council. Clearly, as the report says, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on how Council is able to discharge our functions. And there is new legislation in place, all members will be aware, which is in place until the 7th of May 2021. Unfortunately, as can be seen by members here tonight that with the current regulations as they stand for this hybrid meeting, there isn't even enough room within the Civic Centre to house all members and officers that are required to be at this meeting of council. And we have other challenges in the other meetings that the council hold, namely the planning, licensing and cabinet, to name but three. Therefore, on page 237 of the agenda pack, the Governance Committee has looked at this and put forward proposals in respect to public participation. I don't intend to go through all the different detail that is clearly set out there, but I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor, that the council may have, and I'm happy to propose these recommendations to council. One final point: these are constantly under review, and when the government changes their regulations nationally, we clearly will look at this on at every opportunity, and when we can allow the public back and it's safe to do so, we will. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor. Can I just ask a question from the chair? I'm aware that we're on YouTube tonight and we've got people at home. Have we got any monitoring of how many people are actually watching this tonight? Because that fits in very nicely with what you're saying about public participation. Can we find out? Can we find out by the back end of the meeting? Or thank you. I just thought it might be an interesting. There might only be 2 people watching, but there might be 7,000 watching. Just thought it might be an interesting. You know. Well, I mean, I've got 5 children. They won't be watching. They'll be watching football. So, any questions? We've got Councillor Michael Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I actually rise to deal with the point about members of this council being able to speak at other committee meetings. And I'd like to commend the Governance Committee who considered this particular proposal. And there was obviously a discussion as to whether to restrict members from speaking on other committees, as has happened in recent weeks. And I commend the Governance Committee for overturning that and restoring the rights of all members to be able to speak at any committee, which is so important in terms of representing our communities. However, there's a reference in the report to requiring members to give 2 days notice of doing so, and I've queried that this afternoon, and it seems like there doesn't seem to be any particular reason, and in terms of technology, it may well be available for all members to freely log into meetings in accordance with normal procedures of the Constitution. I'm just wondering whether that could be looked at moving forwards so that we remove that need to give that 2 days written notice and allow members to engage fully. Thank you for your time.
Councillor Mary Green.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Welcome, by the way, on your first experimental meeting. Right. In this part of the report, there is a reference to the public participation being cumbersome. Surely with this new technology that we've had and the money it's cost, this should not be a problem. As with communication on Teams, as we see from members, there's no problem. You know, you can do that. Or even on YouTube for residents to type in the column at the side a question. So, to me, I don't class that as cumbersome. And even though it's been intimated that this is a temporary measure, I've always felt that in South Ribble, we've always prided ourselves on giving residents transparency and the ability to always express their concerns on any matters. As a long-standing member of planning, I'm very aware that often the public concerns and statements raised during a planning meeting can assist in the committee's deliberations and decision, as also it works in licensing and full council and the other meetings open to the public. I feel that this proposal is in effect stifling the general public, whom we have been elected to serve. I do implore the council this evening to reconsider this decision, and that surely we can get ways round this cumbersome, if there's any problem with it, to still enable the public to have a free speech as I feel they really, really deserve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I spoke about the combined authority, I did omit to mention that this council, irrespective of who has been running it, has always enabled the public to take part in full council meetings and has always recognised the right of public participation, and we should pat ourselves on the back for that. So I do echo what Councillor Mrs Mary Green is saying, that any measures we can take to enable the public to take part would be more than welcome. With regards to Councillor Michael Green, I do find it quite ironic. I'm sure his middle name must be Janus, because he sits in a cabinet at county that even refuses elected members the right to speak on issues that affect their division, but bemoans the fact here that elected members aren't allowed to take part in our committee meetings. If that's his feeling in South Ribble, it will be more than welcome if he takes it back to county.
Councillor Lomax.
Yeah, Councillor Howarth has actually mentioned what I was going to bring up about Lancashire County Council committees being restricted for speakers, and I was just going to ask Councillor Green what he thought of that, but I think that's already been done. Thank you.
Oh, right, Caleb. I've got Councillor Green and then Councillor Smith, and then it'll be you. All right. Councillor Green, Councillor Michael Green.
Chairman, I stand here this evening as a South Ribble Borough Councillor. I'm not here to defend anything that the County Council may choose to make, but as Councillor Howarth has raised the point as to why members were not allowed to speak at Cabinet, he needs to look at his own leader of his group at the County Council, who was responsible for
that. He said, she said, and I'm not having it. Right, thank you very much.
If I could just expand as well, under the current administration at County Hall, all decisions are made transparently in public.
You're not here as a council.
Rather than the
no, sorry. Thank you.
Once again, there's disrespect to councillors.
Thank you, everybody. Stop it. Yes, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just to confirm, Chair, we had 30 members of the public watching the live stream at one point, and we currently have 20 members of the public.
They haven't got bored yet. My word. It's short to something to do on a Wednesday, aren't they? Sorry, Councillor Phil Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think I'd just like to remind everybody that this is South Ribble Borough Council, and that goes everywhere throughout this council chamber. Unfortunately, when somebody mentions County Council, everybody starts jumping up and down, wanting to give up the two penneth, and you know it's completely wrong. This is South Ribble Borough Council. And Councillor Tomlinson over there, you said, yes, Mr Smith, very aggressively. I don't think we need to stand up and start shouting across the council chamber. It's totally uncalled for, totally unprofessional, and we shouldn't be doing it. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Caleb Tomlinson. You want to say something?
Sir, I will withdraw.
Right, okay, thank you. And Councillor Hesketh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My comments actually are in connection with the new system. It does seem to extend the meetings, as it says in the report. But I do worry, in connection with the report, where it restricts it to 3 speakers either way. I can understand the reason for putting it that way, but I do hope that there would be some discretion if a large development came forward and we needed more people to speak. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Margaret Smith.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Deputy Mayor, sorry. I was interested when we had the last debate on the climate change agenda, because the question was read out very ably by Councillor Jones. But believe me, I know the lady who sent in the question, and if she'd have been giving you her question, you'd have had so much passion with it. And I think that is what is missing when you actually get a written question from a resident, their feeling for how it should come over and what they really feel. And while it's difficult, I know, for people to read it out in the same way, you really would have got a different sense of what she was about. And could I just say at the end, Mr Deputy Mayor, I have no idea why Councillor Caleb Thompson got up and shouted at me down the council chamber. I don't know what I have done to upset him, but I didn't appreciate it. Thank you.
We did stop it. I've not got anybody else. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So we can bring us back into the important point that we're looking at here. I think, you know, members have spoken well, but please let's remember we're in the midst of a global pandemic. 45,000 people have died in the UK, and we're not doing this because we want to. We're doing this to actually try and facilitate public meetings. That's what we're trying to do. We're doing our best. It is an interim arrangement, and we will continue to review it. But what we're looking to do is, wherever possible, allow the public to interject with the council and its committees. The legislation as it's written doesn't require us to do so. And if members wanted, or if the administration wanted, we could just completely close down till May next year and just make every decision by a delegated or urgent decision, which is something I will not sign up to. We're trying our best to, in very challenging times, to introduce some small changes to the Constitution, but I'll remind members this is only until May of next year. May of next year, if not before, it will go back to normal. Regarding the comments about the system, the electronic systems being cumbersome, we're learning daily. This is our second meeting now with this hybrid system. It's working well and the officers should be commended for that. However, it is challenging, it is difficult to get dialed into, but moving forward in the autumn, if we're on top of this, we may look to try and introduce something else. You know, it's an interim measure. As for planning, particularly in respect to planning, there may be only 3 members of the public permitted to speak for and against for the next few months, but that doesn't mean that elected members can't do what they're elected to do and represent their local community at the planning committee. And I said this at the governance committee, we as elected members now need to step up and make sure that we fully represent the people that elected us. So given that, I'm happy to commend once again the recommendations of the report and urge all members to support. Thank you.
I've nobody on. Oh, Mary Green.
Yes, Mr Deputy Mayor, can I ask for a named recorded vote, please?
Are we all standing up? Oh, we don't need to stand up. We don't need to stand up. Come on, that's too much like hard work. Come on, we can do the name call thing, can't we? Yeah. You're pretty much going to do it. You're pretty much going to do it anyway. Yeah. Okay. So now take the vote on this.
Okay, the recommendations are that Council agree to the proposed approach as outlined in the report in relation to public participation at council meetings, and that there be a delegation to myself to make necessary changes to the Constitution to effect such a change. Councillor Adams. Councillor Alty.
4.
Councillor Bell.
4.
Councillor Blow.
4.
Councillor Bretherton. Councillor Bilinski-Gelder. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Clark. Councillor Colton.
Against.
Councillor Donoghue. Councillor Evans.
4.
Councillor Flannery.
4.
Councillor Forrest.
4.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Mary Green. Councillor Michael Green. Councillor Hesketh.
Against.
Councillor Higgins. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Susan Jones.
4.
Councillor Lomax.
4.
Councillor Marsh. Councillor Marsh. Councillor Martin. Councillor Amelia. Councillor Moon.
Against.
Councillor Mort.
Against.
Councillor Molyneux. Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Rainsbury. Councillor Sharples. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Margaret Smith. Councillor Phil Smith. Councillor Suthers.
Against.
Councillor Titherington. Councillor Caleb Tomlinson. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson. Councillor Trafford. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walton. Councillor Watkinson.
For.
Councillor Watson. Councillor Wharton Hardman.
Against.
Councillor Wooldridge.
For.
He's not here, is he? Oh, sorry, Councillor Yates. Apologies.
Against stifling debate.
Yeah. The recommendation is carried. There are 25 votes for and 21 votes against.
Thank you. Item 14B, the Constitution, My Neighbourhoods. I call upon the Leader of the Council, Paul Foster, to move the recommendations in this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't tell you how desperately disappointed I am in the Conservative group using a pandemic to be politically opportunistic and say that there's stifling debate when everything that we are doing as a council is to promote debate. They should be ashamed of themselves. And it isn't funny, whoever's laughed. Hopefully, Mr. Mayor, we can have a grown-up debate about the neighbourhood forums. The Governance Committee put forward these proposals to Council for considerations, and they are basically changing the procedure rules to allow for more swifter decision making and slightly different decision making following the changes that have been voted through Cabinet and Council, and also to make any other, to then delegate authority to the Director of Governance to make any changes to other parts of the constitutions as a consequence of renaming the neighbourhood areas My Neighbourhood Community Hubs. On pages 242, 243 are the details of the changes that are being proposed, and the existing text and new text of the Constitution is also included within the papers, and I commend this to Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this seconded? Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions from any members of the Council? Councillor Michael Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I'm particularly concerned about one change which is in this. So the current text, if you look at the document, sets out that before a decision is taken, the My Neighbourhood Chairman has to make every effort to gain the consensus of the members before making that decision. The new text proposes that My Neighbourhood Community Hub Chairman and Vice Chairman must consult with the members before making any decision. That is a subtle but a very important difference. Of course, anybody can consult and then simply choose to ignore the responses that they receive from that. So could I seek assurance this evening that firstly, the chairman and vice chairman of each My Neighbourhood Community Hub will consult with all members of that hub, firstly, and that the responses to that said consultation will be published formally by the council so that there's a complete record of any decision making as we proceed forwards. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, Councillor?
Yeah, we're fine with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? I'm looking. No? Okay, fine. We've no written questions from anybody, so on to the vote.
So there is two recommendations: that council approve the proposed changes to the My Neighbourhood procedure rules, and that the Director of Governance and Monitoring Officer be granted delegated authority to make those changes, subject to the amendments that have been agreed in the room tonight concerning the recording of consultation and publication of consultation. Are there any dissenters? No. No, that recommendation is passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 14C, Constitution Appointment and Employment Panel. I call upon the Leader of the Council, Councillor Paul Foster, to move the recommendations.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, this is fresh on all our minds, having gone through this process of the past, or the Employment and Employment Panel, having been through a difficult process over the past 14 months, and therefore it was deemed appropriate to quickly review the Constitution and make a number of amendments where, following dialogue with the LGA, we considered that the Constitution required improvements. If I may, Mr. Mayor, we are going to suggest a slight amendment to what's been proposed on the back of a couple of issues, shall we say. I'm referring on page 252 to the introduction historically of this initial filter panel. Members that were on the previous council will recall that the Governance Committee at the time did not recommend the inclusion of an initial filter panel, and actually it was Mrs. Margaret Smith, the Leader of the Opposition, that introduced that at full council against the Governance Committee's recommendations. The disappointing thing at the time, and this is again area for improvement moving forward, is that the Conservative members of the Governance Committee who had voted with us against the initial filter panel at the committee meeting then voted with Councillor Mrs. Smith against their own recommendations at the council meeting, which was extremely disappointing. The reason we didn't like the initial filter panel at the time is it was dangerous. It was undemocratic. The Employment and Appointment Panel and any IDC is always politically proportionate. Always. The initial filter panel was just the leader at the time and the chief executive and or the monitoring officer, dependent on the nature of the complaint. They had ultimate powers to filter out anything they wished to filter out. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, a previous leader of this council misused that filter panel and filtered out an LGA independent investigation report and would not permit it, into the chief executive, and would not permit it to go forward to the IDC for review. Oh my goodness, if that decision had not been made, we quite probably would have not been in the position we found ourselves last week. Exactly what we didn't want to happen did happen. At the meeting of the Governance Committee that I was present at, Councillor Damien Bretherton put forward proposals to the Governance Committee that the initial filter panel should be politically proportionate, and that was voted down because it wasn't felt appropriate, because the IDC and the Employment and Appointment Panel is politically proportionate. Having considered what Damien has said, having considered what has happened historically in this council, We therefore think it's only appropriate that the initial filter panel is removed from the process. I therefore want to recommend the slight amendment to Council that the initial filter panel is moved out of the process that deals with any disciplinary matters or complaints about statutory officers, and commend the other recommendations to Council. Thank you.
I'm happy to second that.
Who said that?
Ian.
Thank you. Whoever said it. Ian, thank you, Ian. Can't see him.
Still awake.
Do we need to debate the alteration that you want to make?
It's up to you, Stuart.
We do, don't we? Yes, it's fine. Councillor Margaret Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon, it is getting late in the evening. I feel that this is a little bit unfortunate to have been sprung on us like this. What do we normally do in the Governance Committee? We have a subcommittee that normally debates the constitutional changes. As it happens, because of the situation we're in, this particular panel actually sat as a Governance Committee. When you're sitting in a slightly less strict way, you can actually sit down and discuss things a lot more upfront, I suppose is the best way to put it. I am not happy to just have this sprung on to me without it actually being debated properly by the Governance Committee. And I think if this is what is going to happen, I think we should take it back to the Governance Committee in the first instance. Let them have a look at it again, because there was, as Councillor Foster says, a recommendation from Councillor Bretherton that we did it a different way, and it was debated, and we came to the conclusion, and then there was a recommendation put that we wouldn't change it that particularly to make it proportionate, politically proportionate. I do think in this instance it would be much better, and I think people would feel a lot easier if it was taken back there and had another look at it. And at this moment in time, if you can't do that, I'm afraid I can't vote for it. And I want to vote for it because I voted for it in the first instance. I debated it at the Governance Committee with the rest of the governance members, and we did come to that conclusion. And I don't think it's right to suddenly turn it round and take something out that has actually been voted on by that committee. So I hope that Councillor Foster in this instance would allow that to happen and for it to go back to governance, and let's have another look at it. And then I think we'd all be a lot more happy. It's a very sensitive subject, is this? Very sensitive. And I think we've got to be careful that we don't just have a knee-jerk reaction to this, and let's just take it slowly and let's get it right, because I think that's the right way to do it. Thank you.
Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you. Just a very quick point of clarification. Should this proposal to remove the need for initial filter panel, does that comply with the JNC model rules?
It does. It does. All right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Michael Green.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. I rise to support Councillor Mrs Smith. I'm somewhat concerned about this being sprung upon the Council this evening by Councillor Foster. I'm not saying that we would be necessarily against it moving forwards, but I think a matter of this significance needs to be referred back to the Governance Committee to consider it in more detail. The proposal that we've just heard this evening that was made by Councillor Bretherton, to me personally, seems to have some merits in it as a more attractive option moving forwards. But I don't personally think we should decide on something of this nature and this significance without proper notice in advance. And I think this should go back to the Governance Committee. I can't find it now in the Constitution, but my recollection is that if there are any motions that propose changes to the Constitution, they are not for debate in any case and must be automatically referred back to the Governance Committee. But perhaps the monitoring officer can either confirm that I'm correct in that or say that I'm not correct. as the case may be. But I would urge all members not to determine this evening and refer it back to governance. Thank you.
Clark, I'll just go through the Councillor Clark, and then we'll go back to the monitoring officer. Yeah.
Just quickly, I think if the council voted for this at this stage, they would be being disrespectful to an important committee, the Governance Committee, and it's been criticised in the past for its activities by Councillor Foster tonight, and I think he's showing some disrespect to it if it's not referred back to the Governance Committee.
Oh, this is a very interesting meeting. I'm having all sorts of things told in my ear now. Councillor Foster.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The hypocrisy of the Conservative group is, honestly, they have just voted against a recommendation of the Governance Committee. They've just voted against it. So we need to be careful here. Secondly, Councillor Mrs. Smith, when she was leader of this council, proposed the changes to council against the recommendations of the then Governance Committee. She's now arguing strongly against what she did. The JNC Model Code does not have a filter panel in it. That is fact. The fact that the filter panel being there is actually dangerous in my view, because it doesn't form part, as I say, of the Model Code. It should be removed for the reasons I stated, because it's the safest position for the council and it's the safest position for our statutory officers. If the Governance Committee, and Councillor Watkinson, who I've spoken to, who is the chairman of the Governance Committee, who agrees with the view that I'm expressing today, wish to have a separate look at it and bring proposals back to council that wants to introduce the filter panel, then that's absolutely in their gift to demonstrate why that is required. But I'd remind all members that this full council alone are the only people that can make any changes to our constitution, and therefore it's for this council to make this decision. It appears to me that to stand there and say we're disrespecting the Governance Committee when the Conservative group has just voted en masse against recommendations of the Governance Committee that I think the Conservative members on the Governance Committee voted for as well, is just hypocrisy at its worst. I'm here and councillors are here to protect the council. This protects the council. Everybody knows in here the evidence of what happened when that initial filter panel was used by a member sat in here inappropriately. Thank you.
Councillor Foster. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. We really are through the looking glass here, aren't we? We've gone through into that other world where up is down and down is up. Just 10 minutes ago, maybe even less, the entire Conservative group voted against a recommendation that came from the Governance Committee. And then, when the leader proposes an amendment that means him giving up power, he's proposing an amendment that would give power away or prevent him wielding power. They decide, because they are the opposition, they simply have to oppose and say it would be disrespectful to the committee that they've just voted against en masse. Just think about what Councillor Foster is proposing here. He's proposing giving up the power to filter out any complaints against senior officers so that the IDC can't consider them, which is what happened in the past. He's come to council and say, I think that's dangerous and I'm prepared to give that power away. And because the opposition seem to be in a space where they oppose simply for the sake of opposing, whether that opposition is constructive or otherwise, they oppose. They oppose. They oppose the leader of the opposite group giving up power. That's the place we've found ourselves in. Now, I know it's late, and I know we're all suffering from hunger pangs, and sometimes people do strange things when they're hungry. But to vote for the opposition to vote against the council leader giving away power, and then saying the exact opposite of how they acted 10 minutes ago, really is Alice through the looking glass territory. Let's go to the vote. Let's go to the vote, and you can vote the opposite way that you voted 10 minutes ago, and good luck to you. And at the risk of being something of a cabinet lackey, I did praise Councillor Foster. I commended him on bringing the Coach House report to the council because it was the right thing to do. And for a leader, how refreshing it is for a leader to come to full council and say, I've got this power, the ultimate power, and now I'm going to propose giving it away. Well done, Councillor Foster. I think your suggestion complies with what Councillor Bretherton asked for, and it protects the council, and I'll certainly be voting for the amendment.
Yes, it's you, Chris.
Thank you. This is just to respond to Councillor Michael Green's issue in relation to the Constitution. Article 16 of the Council Constitution addresses review and revision of it.
Can I, excuse me, Councillor Smith? It's all right. Let's listen to what.
Paragraph 4 of that relates to changes to the Constitution. It simply says, for approval, the Governance Committee has a responsibility to maintain an overview of the Constitution, but only full council can approve changes to it. Changes should only be made further to a report from the monitoring officer. There is no limitation on amendments to proposals received from Governance Committee within the Constitution.
Right. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you. Again, just a bit of clarification. My earlier question about does it comply with JNC regulations. I've got here Appendix A, which was the report that went to governance in September 2016. And at the top of it, it says key stages in the proposed model disciplinary procedure set out in the JNC for Chief Executive's Handbook, September 2016. And in that flowchart, there is the existence of an initial filter panel. So have those regulations, September 2016, been updated?
Councillor Smith. I've got you next, and then.
There is a difference between a filter panel and a filtering process. The JNC process envisaged that the filtering process would be undertaken by the IDC. There is a difference between a filter panel and a filter process. The JNC process envisaged that filtering process would be the initial meeting of the IDC. So effectively you had a pre-filtering meeting in the process as set up here. This is the first meeting I haven't brought the JNC model procedure to.
Are you saying that these rules have changed since 2016?
No, I'm saying you don't need to set up an initial filter panel that sits outside the IDC process.
Well, this says you need to set up a filter panel. That's the exact wording, initial filter panel.
The membership of the filter panel, or the filter panel that is set up under the council's process, the one that's been used, includes decision makers being other officers of the council. That isn't part of the JNC process. The decision makers in the JNC process are all members. Now, the members of the filter panel that this council set up were leader of the council and another statutory officer, be it the chief executive, monitoring officer, or section 151. It would only be one of those two. So that filter panel sits outside the model procedure because I am not a decision maker in relation to the IDC process, and neither is the chief executive or interim chief executive.
Thank you. clarification to my question.
Margaret Smith.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. I'm glad it's been explained to me by Mr Moyster that it sits outside. I think it's a long time ago since that particular issue came to this council. I think it was 2016, which is 4 years ago. Time has certainly moved on since then. And I'm big enough to say I possibly was hasty when I said I would vote against it. I can understand now where it's coming from, and maybe I've come back out of the looking glass, as Councillor Tomlinson has said. The reason we voted against the one at 14A was we felt very strongly that the public should have a right to be involved, which is a totally different thing to this. This is something that is within the council. So I'm quite happy at this moment in time to say that I will now vote for it. Thank you.
Titherington.
Well, I'm grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for saying that. I was just inquiring is that how many members, and certainly newly elected members, know that the filter panel existed? How many knew what it would do? I mean, and Councillor Foster has referred to a decision that was made by the filter panel, and I suspect that the majority of councillors, members of this council, didn't know that that decision had been made. I don't remember it being reported anywhere. I don't remember where it went to. I don't remember whether it went to the Governance Committee, whether it went to the Scrutiny Committee, whether it was reported at full council. I suspect it wasn't because I didn't know about it. I didn't know about that decision. And I'm really disappointed because, well, I'm grateful for the Leader of the Opposition for changing her mind and saying what she did, because we really are reaching that stage that everything that we say is going to be opposed for the sake of opposition. I mean, so it's a bit like, you know, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. So, I mean, you know, let's bring some sort of adult conversations into it. I think the filter panel is a threat to democracy, frankly. It's a threat to the council, because what you're doing is you're empowering one individual or 2 individuals really to make a decision, and then there's no accountability for it. There's no accountability for it. So, I mean, if we're talking on the one side that we want transparency and openness, and then voting for a panel that is going to really meet in secret, then we are doing a flip-flop. So I'm grateful. I think we should support the motion. Thank you.
Can I just remind councillors that we still have a considerable amount to get through. So I have Councillor Margaret Smith and Councillor Phil Smith. A second and a half you've got.
It will be very quick. I just want to say that I knew nothing about what went on at that filter panel because I wasn't the leader at that time. And to be quite honest, it was new to me when it was told to me only a few weeks ago. So I want that to be made quite clear. The person who made that decision has not been named, which is perfectly correct, but it wasn't me, is what I'm saying, because I didn't know anything about it. And I'll leave it at that, Mr.
Mayor. I will be very quick, Mr. Deputy Mayor, Miss Deputy Mayor. I'm just getting a bit fed up with people saying, let's have a grown-up conversation. Come on. We're all councillors around here. We have grown-up conversations every day. I don't think it needs to be mentioned in a derogatory mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Now then, we're on the vote. Now, what are we doing with this amendment?
Right.
She said.
I'll make some notes. Okay. So there is a recommendation for the adoption of changes to the terms of reference for the appointment and employment panel, which is to include the removal of the filter panel. So, are there any dissenters? Thank you. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Moving on. Item 15, questions to the leader. Are there any questions to the leader? No, good. Moving on. Questions to members of Cabinet, and I'll take these in order. Questions to, sorry? Oh, sorry, Councillor Green. I didn't look at my thing.
Thank you. Is the leader confident that this council is complying with its requirements under GDPR regulations?
Councillor Forrest? Foster? Sorry. Whoever you are.
To the best of my knowledge, I am informed by the statutory officers that we are.
Any more questions for the leader? Yes, Councillor Green. Sorry.
Members will be aware that through the internal audit process, there were a number of failures in GDPR, and we're still on with the improvements that are necessary. We're making good progress. So just to be absolutely clear, there may be areas, I haven't got the detail to hand, but again, I'm quite happy to update Councillor Green outside the meeting about progress on the recommendations that were made to improve our approach to GDPR.
Thank you. Right, item 16. No, you've come back up again. Yes, come on.
My supplementary. Can I thank you? Can I thank Mr. Earl for that response? And I would appreciate that information. But I've actually witnessed very recently what I would question whether they are breaches of GDPR. So, for instance, we've had meetings going out via Teams with members of the public speaking into those meetings using mobile phone numbers, and those phone numbers have been recorded on the meetings, which I think is a breach of personal data. At last week's full council meeting, a letter was written by the subject of the debate at last week's full council meeting without going into detail. I think there were at least 2 letters where that person's home address appeared to be included rather than being redacted, which caused significant concern to me. And I'm just wondering what action that the council has taken with regard to these matters. Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
In respect to the first part of your supplementary question, Councillor Green, you were just criticising me before because we don't allow public access, and now you're criticising me because we're allowing public access via telephones. The Chief Executive has answered the question. We will look into all these issues. However, in respect to the particular issue that you're on about, and I'm assuming it's regarding last week's meeting, a decision was made by the monitoring officer following external legal advice that nothing in any of the reports could be redacted because those are confidential reports not going outside of this council. Therefore, they are not in the public domain. And I'm comfortable with that. However, as the Chief Executive said, he'll write to you more generally about GDPR and the process that we're working through in respect to the improvements.
Question for the leader. Agree with me that this council's record under the previous administration on GDPR was lamentable, and in fact has resulted in a comprehensive action plan having to be drawn up as to what action this council now needs to take. Would he further agree with me that if members have specific examples of where they are concerned about breaches of GDPR, then the most appropriate action to take is to report to the Chief Executive?
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. Yes, 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 and yes.
I will now move on to item 16. Members of the Cabinet, to Cabinet Member Councillor Michael Tomlinson of get your mouth. I'll have to change my teeth, it's no use. Councillor Mick Titherington, Health, Leisure and Wellbeing. Any questions? Councillor Ogilvie.
Yes, thank you. Could I just ask, could you update us on the status of our leisure centres in terms of their openness to public activity, or what the plans are going forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. Yes, the Leyland Leisure Centre will be opening from the 25th of July. There will be limited opening to allow for extensive cleaning in between. The Bamber Bridge and Penwitham Leisure Centres will not be opening on that date, because of the air, I don't know how you describe it, but the airflow to ensure that the fresh air is able to flow correctly in view of the pandemic and COVID. So, I mean, we are assessing the work that is needed to carry out so that we can meet the provisions to allow for opening.
Thank you.
To Leyland then opening on the 25th of July, does that include the swimming pool?
Yes, it does. Yeah. You'll have to come in your beach wear though. That's how I understand it. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Questions to Cabinet Member Finance, Property and Assets, Councillor Matthew Tomlinson. Councillor Bretherton.
Hi. I'm just I'm slightly confused. As a new councillor, obviously, I've been reading various documents since I've been elected. The subject of value for money keeps coming up, and it just crossed my mind that when we had the professional surveys report by Sanderson and Weatherall, 21st of October last year, you probably recall that, regarding the Mackenzie Arms. In that report, and obviously we paid a substantial amount of money for that, I believe it was £26,000 or thereabouts, there was a section that said value for money. Now, under that section, there seems to be, it implied that there'd be a permanent loss of capital in the region of £705,000. And there was a suggestion of an alternative which would likely produce a positive land value and a potential profit. Now, the scheme proposed and approved by Cabinet, having read that value for money report, would deliver, according to the professional surveyor's report, it would deliver a suboptimal payback when benchmarked against more viable alternatives. Now, obviously, as a new member reading that, to me, it implies that the professional valuation report, under the heading value for money, was telling the council that there is a viable alternative, and the alternative that's been recommended by Cabinet is actually an inferior option that would actually lose the council £705,000. So my question is, could you please explain to a new member what does value for money mean? Because in the real world, value for money isn't losing money. When you've received a recommendation, in fact, you could believe that value for money means you're getting value in terms of either breaking even or at least making a profit, but definitely not losing money. So if you could explain to a new member what value for money means, please.
Thanks for your question. I think, thank you for your question. I think you'll be very interested when the report on the history of this site comes forward in the autumn. I am happy to get together with you outside the meeting and we can have a talk about this, but our genuine options on the Mackenzie Arms site were extremely limited for reasons you will discover, and I would argue that providing the high quality affordable housing for our residents on this site, which will eventually bring back a financial return, does indeed provide value for money, although it's not everybody's definition of value for money. This is a site that we own, is impossible for us to move on, and you'll find out the reasons why when all the details of the history of this site come on. And for me, bringing it back into a positive use that adds social value to our economy and provides high quality, affordable housing for our residents, in my eyes, does indeed provide us with value for money. I think you will genuinely be really interested in the report when it comes out, because the context to this is all.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading the report when it comes to council, but in the professional report that we received, that under the heading value for money, in one of the paragraphs it says it should be noted that a private developer may deliver a different scheme of terraced amuse houses only and increase the density of the scheme by reducing unit sizes, increasing the height to 2.5 to 3 stories, and by including less car parking space and amenity. This, coupled with cost savings, would likely produce a positive land value. Now, in my mind, the council could have quite easily gone down that route and still offered affordable housing. We would have maybe got more units on there, housing for more people, and maybe not lost the same amount of money. But I am looking forward to the report. If the report indicates that we can't go down that route, then I'll take my hat off. But I'm sure I'm sure we could have gone down that route as recommended, and we would have had a better outcome for our residents in terms of loss of capital and housing more people.
Yes, thank you. I think we did have this debate at Cabinet where you memorably used the phrase "for the many, not the few," which did raise a few raised eyebrows. So if your definition then of value for money, could we have built more, smaller, cheaper, less carbon efficient houses on this and made more of a profit? Yes, we could. Were we prepared to do that? No, we weren't.
Thank you. More questions? Right, moving on to questions, Cabinet Member, Community Engagement, Social Justice and Welsh Building. Councillor Nialla Berlinski-Gelder. Anybody got any questions? No, you got off to that one, you're all right. Questions, Cabinet Member, Planning, Regeneration and City Deal, Councillor Bill Evans. Yes, Michael Green.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Evans, I've been informed that the original decision regarding the planning application for Chain House Lane has been quashed. Please could the Cabinet Member send me a copy of that decision and the copy to any other members who are interested. But could he expand this evening on what the implications of this decision may well be for South Fibble and our partners in Preston and Chorley? Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, for your question. You're telling us something we didn't know. I don't know that it's been quashed, but I'll have to investigate it and come back to you.
Is that all right with you, Councillor Green? Good. Councillor Phil Smith?
Thank you. I'll have a written. It is a bit late, so I'll ask Councillor Evans my usual question that I've asked a few times now, which is about the Leyland Town deal and what progress is being made. I noticed at scrutiny he mentioned some names that are actually on the town board, if that's what it is. So if you could give me, if you can do it now, I'll accept it now. If he needs to write to me, a written response would be acceptable. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith, for your question. The board's met 4 or 5 times now. We've managed to get a chairman. The government, when they told us to put the town deal together, told us we couldn't chair it. We had to get an independent member of business to do it. We've got a young lady from a business on Off Lane that's doing it. When we originally set the board up, we had about, I can't remember, 28, 30 members, and the meetings have been consistent. We're getting the same amount of attendance and input to each meeting. We were informed by the Member of Parliament that the government have set aside £25 million for us. Initially, they give us £164,000 to do the spade work, if you will, get the project up and running. Since then, Boris has announced a further £750,000 to us, so we're looking at utilising that at the moment. We've got officers and a consultant putting a bid together, and we're hoping to have the bid into the government by October. If we had to tell them by the end of July when we were putting the bid in, we've told them, and they seem to be happy with it, so the bid will be going actually into government in October. That's about it. The questions at scrutiny that I got asked was mainly about membership. What happened is that when the government invited us to be one of the 100 towns to bid for these monies, they give us a bit of a criteria as to who to invite, and we wrote a similar letter out to a number of organisations: Runshire College, Berries, Leyland Trucks, Farrington Parish Council, because they were the next neighbouring parish council to us. We already had representation from South Ribbleborough Council, obviously, with the leader himself and the Leyland Neighbourhood Chair. When we wrote to the County Council asking for their nomination, they nominated an officer rather than a councillor. And I've written back to Councillor Green saying you need to pick that up. It's not up to us to pick your teams, it's up to them to pick the teams. So he needs to go back to County Council and see if they can change who they send. Well, I think that answers your question, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. I would like you to clarify that £750,000 that we've been given. From my understanding of that it is not for the town deal, that it's actually for separate projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Probably. We are using it to, we were looking to purchase some land in Leyland Town Centre to enhance the suggestions on the master plan, and I think that's what they were looking at. But what I'll do, I'll check up and come back to you if that's okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Nobody else? Right. Question is to Cabinet Member Environment, Councillor Susan Jones. No. Good. Oh, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Excuse me. The tree policy that we now have was adopted in March this year under a delegated decision procedure. Having now read the report, I'd like to congratulate those officers involved in its production. No doubt the portfolio holder has read the audit report that came to the Governance Committee, which identified significant and serious risk to this council from potential claims against it. There are a number of questions that arise from this which I think are important, and I'd like to know, and I'm sure other members would like to know, what the size of the backlog of the inspection work is, how many trees do we have on the database, what is the timescale for replacing the existing systems by a digital system, and how many of the 100,000 trees which are planned will be actually on South Ribble Borough Council's property. What is the cost of the inspection and maintenance work at the moment, and what's the future cost, and will the work that we have as a backlog be outsourced or dealt with in-house? I hope you can answer those questions for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Councillor Jones will be pleased that my question is a bit simpler. Could I invite the Cabinet member to come down to Moss Side and take a tour around with my fellow ward councillor, Councillor Mrs Green, to look at playground facilities and how we can work together to improve these for the benefit of young people locally? Thank you.
Councillor Sue Jones.
Yes, I'll answer Councillor Green first, if that's okay. It's probably the easier one to answer under the circumstances. I'd be very, very happy to. We do obviously have the issues of social distancing, but as we're all going to be wearing masks by Friday, if you want to give me some dates or whatever, but most of the time I'm free. I do apologise, Councillor Clark. I won't be able to answer your questions tonight. If you could put them in writing, that would be very grateful. I wouldn't expect, well, okay. If you put them in writing, I'll get back to you.
If I can come back on that.
Yes.
I'm very disappointed because these are very serious failings which were identified by the internal auditor at the governance meeting. And these failings have been identified in many months ago to be addressed. And I'm surprised that you, as portfolio holder, cannot answer any one of those questions. I'm sorry, but I will put them to you in writing.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Perhaps if you'd have put them in writing before this meeting, I'd have had an opportunity to prepare for them.
Thank you. Any more questions? Nope. Okay, we're on to item 17 now. Questions for chairs of committees in my neighbourhood areas. Any questions for chairs of committees? Michael? Councillor, it's going to be your meeting tonight. I'm going to give you marks out of 10 in a minute.
Sorry to keep you here. And there was a football match I wanted to watch as well, but there we go. Madam Deputy Mayor, thank you, but I ask you, this question is for yourself, but in your capacity as chairman of my neighbourhood. So we've not had a meeting of the Lower My Neighbourhood for some time, and I'm just wondering when they will recommence. Because obviously there's a lot of matters to discuss, not least of which is the Leyland Town Board. I understand you sit on that board, and it would obviously be useful to get engagement from the wider members of the Leyland and Farrington area. So if you could just clarify on that moving forward, that would be helpful. Thank you.
We've been on lockdown, so that's probably a very good excuse not to have had a meeting. I have spoken to Becky Heap. And we were chatting about having a forum meeting, and because all these changes have been going on, the community involvement thing, and it's been changes from being a forum to being a hub to being whatever, there was a certain amount of uncertainty about what direction it would be going. And so when I spoke to Becky, funnily enough, only last week, she said, yes, we should be having a meeting now because we know more about what the structures are, because we just voted on it, haven't we? So we now know what the structures are, so we can move forward. So I will be looking at, well, it's going to be difficult because I can't be the chair of the forum as from the end of September because I've got another job to do and I'm not allowed to be on a committee and to be a chair. So whoever that chair, but I will be looking at probably, where are we now? We're in July, we've got August off, haven't we? So I'll be looking at possibly September, October when the next meeting would be arranged. I can't see it being before then because of the pandemic and one thing and another. But that will be my best guess, in all fairness. But that's not an excuse, it's just, you know, this is the first time I've been out in 3 months. I'm not used to public. Yes, go on, Mallow.
Thank you. And it's genuinely nice to see you, actually. But I wasn't meaning just the public-facing meetings. I was also meaning the planning meetings. And obviously, we've got technology that easily facilitates that, and it will be really helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have a word with Becky and we'll arrange one as soon as we can. Okay. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I'm alluding to the future, perhaps. I'd just like to ask, given that we heard about this quashing business with Chainhouse Lane, I was wondering if the chair for the planning committee might be able to allude to whether that's a true thing or not.
Yeah, thank you. To question councillor.
Yeah, I didn't realise. Yeah, thanks for your question, Councillor Martin. There is absolutely no truth. It's a rumour being started by someone, and there's no truth in it. And that is why the portfolio holder for planning doesn't know anything whatsoever about it as well. Okay, thanks for your question.
To any chairs of committee, sorry.
And confirm that we've not received any notification about the decision, and we normally get a draft decision notice for fact checking. That has not been received either.
That's the Chainhouse Lane.
Yes, that's not been received either. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Any more chairs of committees and neighbourhood areas? Anybody wants to ask any questions? No? Good. Any Anything else anybody wants? No? We're up to speed. Brilliant. Good. I'm whipping the pages over here. I'm whipping the pages over. Questions to members, member champions and representatives on outside bodies. Are there any questions for member champions? No? Brilliant. Any questions for representatives on outside bodies? No? Good. Right. We come to item 19, which is the exclusion of press and public. The remaining item is considered to be exempt as it contains information relating to any consultations or negotiations or contemplated consultations or negotiations in connection with any labour relations matters arising between the authority or a minister of the Crown and employees of or officers holders under that authority. Would somebody like to move the exclusion of the press and public? Thank you. Would somebody like to second that? Thank you.